Welcome to everybody to the live stream. Wake up now. The Monaco Grand Prix is over. Now it's time back for some Formula One racing again this weekend in the Spanish Grand Prix. The third part of a triple header. I mean, pity those poor guys in the pit lane. My heart bled for all those mechanics, particularly everybody involved, but the mechanics particularly at Monaco with the prospect of the 2 pit stop race and the cramped conditions in the pit lane at Monaco. Luckily, nothing happened dramatically. And that was mainly because there was no safety car at a critical moment of the race, or a couple of safety cars that would have induced everybody to come in, even more so than normal. And, you know, I just feared the worst for that, but it didn't, and that was good. I guess, well, it was good that nobody was hurt anyway. Massive misgivings about the whole 2 pit stop concept for that race and how it was supposed to improve the Monaco Grand Prix. We'll get onto that, no doubt, during the live feed. I spoke quite a lot about that yesterday with Cameron as well. And I always try. I know it's very difficult these days in this world in which we live. I always try, if I'm going to be critical, also to be constructive simultaneously. Well, in the next sentence anyway, because it's very easy just to say this is rubbish, that's rubbish, and try to get viewers or whatever a lot of people do, I think, these days. I've said enough about that 2 pit stop thing because I was condemning it long before the race started. Weeks before, when the minute was even thought about, I said, this is ridiculous. It's so artificial and it's going to make things worse, not better. And so, end of paragraph there. How can we make Monaco as a Grand Prix more attractive to the TV viewing audience? That's what it's all about. That's why they made this change, this 2 pit stop thing, to try to make the race more attractive. In their world, in their mind, the answer is always more overtaking. That's what we've got to have to make racing more attractive. I actually don't agree with that, and I've often expressed that opinion. Overtaking is great if it's good overtaking and it's done well at the right time, and it's a build-up of pressure, or it's the guy in front finally making a bit of a mistake, or the guy behind doing a really, really cool move down the inside or outside, you know, whatever you want to look at. Maybe Max Verstappen, turn 1, Imola, you know, that sort of thing. That's overtaking. But DRS overtaking, boring for me. But I suppose TV can do quite a lot with that. But that's the point, TV. And I've often said that I think Netflix, and I've just said it prior to this, Netflix does skim the surface of what Formula One has to offer. There is so much going on in the entire Formula One world, the economy of Formula One, if you like. The drivers are an incredibly important visual part of it, but they are a tiny part of it, actually. If you think about the size of all the Formula One teams, and you look at all the various aspects of any given Formula One team, whether it be the technology, the people behind the technology, the operation of the wind tunnel, the operation of the computing systems, and then you go beyond that. Obviously, there's on the one side, you've got the business side of Formula One, you've got the sponsorship procurement, you've got the sponsorship management and execution. On the other side of the coin, you've got the construction and building of the car, the mechanics, the factory, all the suppliers, and then beyond that, you've got all the logistics. And then you got the politics, which I guess you could say comes from the top with the team principal. But there's so much there around which you can do additional great television. And of course, the teams are always going to be as protective as they possibly can of all their information and of everything that's going out. But if you started with a relatively clean sheet of paper around the Concord Agreement and what the teams would be obliged to do in order to improve the package, and let's just say for the moment, for this one race, the Monaco Grand Prix, you could start miking up key people in the team, you could start miking up the drivers as they're going to and from the track, you could start filming and miking the drivers' briefing before the race, and you could cut in and out with really good directors and production. You would come up with an amazing package for the Monaco Grand Prix. Even if it was a processional race and they're all going around in single file, you could immediately cut back to the radio transmission. Instead of just hearing it, instead of just seeing whoever it is on the pit wall that might be talking and pressing some button, you'd actually know the engineer. This is the engineer. He's talking to Lewis Hamilton right now. Oh, yeah, look, and he's getting a bit annoyed. Yeah, that's good television. Obviously, you know, the teams are not going to want to do that voluntarily. You're going to have to twist their arm. But that's what the Concord Agreement's all about, getting more out of the teams to improve the show. And if it's not the engineers and the drivers, let's have some other aspects. Let's have the mechanics and what they're saying to one another. And let's mic up a couple of the mechanics. Let's make it much more human, because Monaco is always going to be a procession. There is no way around that, short of making it a race every year when the teams don't bring their actual race cars, but instead they develop 250cc gearbox karts and they just race the karts for the weekend with the Grand Prix drivers in them. Wouldn't be a bad thing, but it wouldn't be the Monaco Grand Prix as we know and love it, or not love it. Short of that, this is the only way to do it. Make it a much better television show. And I don't know why they don't do that, because they've got all that content, all that material out there going to waste. No, it's never used. It's never filmed. It's never I mean, right at the end of the race, Lando Norris's friends and family, yeah, some nice shots of cutting to them, but why weren't they mic'd up? Why weren't we seeing that as part of the Grand Prix production? Change it. Don't just go down the same path every time. Oh, this is the way we do the pre-race show. This is the way we do the grid walk. This is the way we do this. Then we cut to that. Everything is so predictable. And it kind of works when it's the normal Grand Prix, when it's the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, or it's Vegas and you've got these long straights with the 3 DRSs. It kind of works. Well, it does work, I guess. Well, I guess the litmus test for that is how many of the Netflix generation actually watch every Grand Prix from start to finish. That's an interesting stat, which I think we need to see, because there's always this reference to the Netflix generation, but let's see how much it's actually transferring into the money-making part of Formula One, which is increasing the number of people watching it on television. It's okay to watch it on Netflix, which is part of the Formula One business, but it's not the same as how many people actually watch it on television, because that's where the real money is. And that's where I think we need to focus. We need to focus on making the TV show much more about people. And if you like, Netflix have shown Formula One finally in the post-Bernie era that it is about people, that people do want to understand what other people are doing and try to understand what goes on behind a Grand Prix driver's mind or inside a Grand Prix driver's mind. But they've never had access to it until now, and it's superficial access. There's a lot more we could be doing out there, and we should make all the Formula One people in their own way are stars, regardless of what they're doing. They're all star people. Most of them work flat out compared with normal human beings. Most of them are totally passionate about what they do. And of course, the most interesting moments are when things are not going well and how they react to that. And Formula One people are very, very impressive people when things are not going well. And we're not really seeing that on the TV coverage we're getting at the moment. We don't really understand what's going on at Mercedes when they're having a terrible Monaco Grand Prix, how they're facing that and how they work through that. We're not understanding what it's like at Ferrari at the moment with all the politics, with 2 megastar drivers in the team, and the team, getting some good results, but not really being where the Tifosi want it to be. We're not really seeing what goes on at Red Bull and how they react when the car isn't very good on a Friday, but they do get it to work on a Saturday in qualifying and the build up to that. All we see is the result. And that's because Red Bull don't want anybody else to know. But my point is that if you have a very good director and a very good team of people working with the teams, you'll very quickly know what can be put out to public consumption and what cannot. It's not difficult to do that. You work with the teams. And the teams know it's in their own interest anyway, if they're getting a lot more people watching this. So that's my positive way of saying the Monaco Grand Prix not only has to stay on the calendar, and it deserves its place on the calendar for the role it's played and is playing in the commercial side of Formula One's success, but also this is a way that we can really improve our love of the Monaco Grand Prix and look forward every year to this one race where we see so much background television and content going on. So that was it. That was my opening rant. Of course, I'm going to take your questions and comments as we go along. We'll start with some of those. So I just bashed my mic and it wasn't too loud as we go along. So the first one is, let's get this going now. Jez James. Hi, Peter. You once said on an excellent TV documentary, Toys for the Boys, which was done in the Williams days by Patrick Uden, very, very good producer, good friend of mine, that Formula One drivers are no better than the cars they drive. Now, could it be that Max is better than his car? Well, did I say that? What I should have said was Enzo Ferrari, when he was once asked that question, and not how much of the win is car and how much is a driver, when his car did win a race. He reckoned it was about 60% car, 40% driver. Now, there will be moments when, like turn 1 in Imola, when the race was actually won by that pass, in my opinion, because at that point, McLaren then basically messed up the strategy for Piastri in the confusion, and Max won the race as a result. So in that specific moment, when he just saw that gap, and there was Oscar braking quite early, conservatively, because he thought he had the corner, and George boxed in behind him, trailing his throttle. Then, you know, Max was probably exceeding what his car was capable of doing around Imola. And as an overall package, I still think the McLaren probably was the quicker car around Imola. Not probably, it was the quicker car around Imola. Better on tyres, better on everything, except that Oscar had to spend all the race in dirty air. And then all that went out the window. And Max won that race in a car not as good as the McLaren. Now, how much of that win was Max? How much of it was Red Bull? We shouldn't detract too much from Red Bull, because they did do some decent upgrades for the car. And Max obviously took that to its fullest extreme. But yeah, you know, I think Max, like all great Grand Prix drivers, in the variables, a variable can be the first corner skirmish, it can be the wet, it can be crosswind, it can be tyres that go off the cliff and how you manage that moment of going off the cliff. All those things are what I would call additional variables that come in as an overlay to a basic way you're going to run a race. All those things are what the great Grand Prix drivers are all about. And yes, in those moments, they can possibly exceed the potential of the car, the academic potential of the car, as distinct from the physical potential of the car. And I think we see that periodically with Charles Leclerc at Ferrari. I think if you take Lewis as a pretty good litmus test of somebody who's a very fast racing driver, 7 world championships, enjoying his life now in Italy, and saying to his sister, I think before the race, or saying to a family member before the race, I still can't believe that I'm lucky enough to be in Formula One driving for Ferrari at Monaco, obviously appreciating the moment. And Charles can do what he did in that same car at Monaco and other circuits too. Then I think Charles is right on the edge of what that Ferrari can deliver. So yeah, good question. And yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed Toys for the Boys. Patrick Uden actually I think we made about 5 films around that whole Williams period. There was a classic one when there was a bit, I don't know if it was in that one, there was a bit of footage of Alan Jones testing at Ricard. I think it was about must have been late 79, maybe 80. And Alan saying something like, "Oh, the car's really bad, Frank. It's bottoming out. You know, really, you know, it's bad. It's hurting my back." And Frank says something like, "Well, you got so much money in the wallet in your back pocket, Alan. I can't imagine you're feeling anything." Yeah, Frank was good like that. I said to Frank once, I don't know how we got onto the subject. It was on the subject of Alan, whether Alan would join Frank in one of his training runs for a marathon. And Frank said, and I said, because I saw it, I was winding Frank up. I said, because I saw he had a new pair of Nike sneakers, didn't he, last race? And Frank said, "Oh yeah, the only time he ever wears those when he goes out to wash his own road car. He never wears them for running." Yeah, they were the days. AJ, FW. Best wishes to AJ. I don't know, you know, haven't heard from him recently, or I haven't spoken to him recently. But actually, the reason I haven't spoken to him recently, I started doing started ringing him on the mobile phone, obviously, just to get his input on each Grand Prix. And it was really good. I really enjoyed his, you know, absolutely no holds barred opinion of all the other drivers and what they were doing. And most of them, in his opinion, they're all wusses, I think. And anyway, it all kind of faded away because I wanted to do it on Zoom and actually get a better audio and all that stuff. And Alan, of course, didn't want to do it on anything other than just a mobile phone when he was out mowing the lawn at the back of the house or whatever. So, yeah, because the audio was so scratchy, we didn't go any further. So Sema Dragun says, "Hola, Peter." Hola. Well, hola is obviously in keeping with this weekend and the tone of this weekend as we go to the Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona, a real racetrack. They love to call it old school racetracks these days. I just call it a real racetrack with real corners. Particularly, I love that exit from turn 2, which is the left-hand part of the first chicane. And then they go into 3. And 3 is flat out. So it's really a straight. But the more you can eliminate lateral load from the car going from 2 to 3 and not have too much weight transfer going on, the better you're going to be through 3 and the less you're going to ask of the tires in the car. It's a great place to watch as well from above. And guess what? They never have TV cameras there, but it's a great place if you're actually at the track to watch there. You're on the inside of the circuit, but you're actually on the outside of turn 2, if you see what I mean. And yeah, you'll see guys like Max, obviously Charles, just coming out of 2, and the most they'll do is go to sort of right of center before they turn into 3. And it's not because that's the racing line, it's because they've done such a good job with the car in the middle of 2 and the amount of steering lock and the way they've gone into 2 and the rotation they've got in the middle of 2 allows them to come out with a lot less load on the car, and therefore to lateral load, that is, and therefore not to ask too much of the car going into 3. But other drivers, I mean, Liam Lawson, Carlos Sainz, will come out of 2 and will have a lot of right rear load, and then they will have to transfer that to the left side. And to do that, they'll need more room to go to the middle of the road, and then they'll be asking more of the tires of the car, and they'll be using more road. There'll be a difference between Albon and Sainz out of there, I predict, as well. Going into, and then 3 is that lovely long corner. 4 is an interesting corner, long right-hander. Bit difficult to see differences between drivers there because it's such a long corner. It's fairly line locked. You can turn in a little bit earlier, but it doesn't really help you that much. The next great corner is 9, really, I think, because there's a lot of crosswind as you go into 9. There's a gap, still is. There's a gap between the grandstands on the left, and if the wind's blowing, whatever it is, from the south, then the crosswind will hit you just as you go into 9. So that's always a good corner. Occasionally people are caught out by that, and the next thing you see is just dust and rubble. Braking for 10 is an interesting thing. High speed, because it's near the end of the lap. You're on a good lap. You want to brake a little bit later, get a bit more time. Oh, locked up. So yeah, 10's an important braking point. And then you've got those last 2 corners are both good now. First one's fairly line locked. The second one, I think you can do quite a lot with the car. Mid-corner there to get a really good rotation for the pit straight. So looking forward to Barcelona a lot. Pirelli bringing the hardest of the tires. We had the softest in the range for the last 2 races. Now we're going to the hardest in the range. And last year, from memory, they did run, I think we saw softs in use in the race. And it's a 2-stopper last year. Probably will be this year, I would imagine. Soft, medium combination. So it should be good. A shout out to Pirelli again. You know, we kind of take them for granted when there are no tyre dramas, but what a job they're doing. And these cars are really quick, and touch wood, you know, they're doing a good job in terms of safety and the tyres lasting the distance. And yeah, if you talk to any Grand Prix driver away from the racetrack in private, they'll probably say, oh, I wish we had, you know, tyres that would last longer or more grip or more this and more that. But having to build tyres for 10 different teams, 24 different racetracks, and make sure you got the production and the logistics sorted, and you've got tires that give you the performance level you want, more or less relative to safety. It's just an amazing achievement. I'm still blown away by how good a job they do, actually. Talk about, I mean, I'm sure they probably get a discount, I would imagine, on all the signage they have around the circuit and so forth. But you know, compared with all the other sponsors that just come in and pour money into it and just have a logo there, Pirelli do an amazing job. And I only say that from vast experience, going back far too long, of Bernie always threatening to put everybody on Avons that he could control and build. Or you can go with Pirelli, and everybody sort of reluctantly going with Pirelli. And that was like that for many years. But now I think many people should realize how good a job they do. Anyway, that's just my... Having said that, I've got this new i20 in Hyundai. 11,000 kilometers I think we've done. Need a new set of P0s on the front. So maybe this was a very opportune moment for me to be saying how good Pirelli was. There was absolutely no connection there. It just suddenly occurred to me to mention that. But the P0s, unbelievable tyres. I mean, these are much quicker, softer tyres than anything that you would have seen on a race car. So probably in the 80s even, let alone the 70s and 60s. Just amazing road tyres. They're almost slicks now, I think. Anyway, I've got to change them. So there we are. Yeah, hola. Next one, Daniel. Okay, sorry, I had that up. Most followers. Hello, this is Daniel Mutiso. Hello from Kenya. Hi. Most followers are either Lewis or Max fans. There's always much to be derised in this sport. Yeah, not quite sure what that means really. I don't want to. Did you mean to write the word derise, as in be negative about? I try not to be negative about Formula One. Of course, there are lots of things you can be negative about Formula One, but I like Formula One. I love Formula One, and I think, you know, I make comments based on a sport that I love and how I think it can be improved. So yeah, I'm sure there are lots of Lewis and Max fans, but you know, just on that point, if you're a Lewis fan, why shouldn't you be a Max fan as well? They're both unbelievably good racing drivers. And if you're a Max fan, why shouldn't you be a Lewis fan? They're both unbelievably good racing drivers. End of story. Recco, hi Peter, have you seen Alex Wurtz's proposal to the Monaco layout, moving the Nouvelle chicane back, modifying Rascasse, or is Monaco just an event for qualifying? Overtaking will always be difficult. Well, yeah, Alex Wurtz, good man, good brain. You know, the history of that chicane is that we need a very slow chicane, because if we had a quicker one, there could be an enormous shunt going into the harbour, and we've had that before. Driver has been killed there, and 2 drivers have gone into the harbour in the past because it was a very fast S-bend. Now, we've got much better safety fencing and everything else, but I think we need a very slow chicane. So what he's saying is have that chicane nearer to the exit of the tunnel, I guess, is he? So then you'd have more DRS going into Sandervoort. Is that what he's thinking, maybe? I'm not sure how that would help the overtaking as such. Make it a little bit... I don't see how that would help, really. Rascasse is another thing. I was thinking about Monaco Grand Prix prior to, what, 1973, I think it was, 72 maybe, when they built that Rascasse swimming pool section. Before that, they just went out of Sandervoort, out of Tabac, around a sort of curving straight where the pits were, and then down to a hairpin, the gasworks hairpin, and then back again, parallel on the other side. And it was a hairpin. And there was opportunity to overtake big time going into the gasworks hairpin, because it was quite a wide bit of road there as well. Massive shunt at the beginning of the 62 Monaco Grand Prix. About 3 cars ended up in the boonies. But we've had some famous overtakes there, not the least of which, of course, was Jack Brabham being passed by Jochen Rindt at the end of the 70 Monaco Grand Prix, when Jack was about to lap Piers Courage's de Tommaso, and he just didn't know which side to go. He didn't make it clear, and Jack sort of waffled a bit, trying not to, you know, he still had the win there, and then just locked up, and that was it. It was a great shame, actually. Jack deserved to win that race. I know Jochen got a lot of credit for that, but Jack definitely deserved to win it. Anyway, that was by the by. That's what we had. And I was thinking, well, we did have overtaking, so maybe we should do that. But then my immediate counter thought was, and I presume this has occurred to Alex, is that if we did that, we'd lose one of the great bits of racing road at Monaco, which is that lovely approach to Rascasse that I've been featuring all weekend, that where you're braking with load on the car into that right-hander. And that's a place where we have seen drivers exceed the ability of their cars. Drivers like Max, very good example. And Charles, extremely good through there. And you could see on the TV, and I hope a lot of people who are watching noticed, when for example, Charles was behind Lando, you could see how much earlier Charles was able to get into that rotation point of Rascasse, purely because of the unbelievable way he was able to brake and turn simultaneously, whereas Lando was coming in a little bit wider, braking more in a straight line, keeping everything, you know, as smooth and as neat as he could, but longer corners. And it would be a shame to lose that bit of road. That's a great bit of road. And under the heading of the great God overtaking, you know, it's not, like, as I said right at the beginning with my whole thing at the beginning of this video, this whole live stream, for me, if you want to say, how do we improve the show, you shouldn't immediately say, we've got to have more overtaking, as if that's the only thing we can do to produce the show. And bear in mind, to improve the show, and bearing in mind Monte Carlo brings to the Formula One calendar a massive amount of history and prestige, and I hesitate to use the word glamour because it's so massively overused, but it does coincide more or less with the Cannes Film Festival, which was hit this year by a power outage, wasn't it? And it does have that history of Grace Kelly coming over because she'd won an Academy Award, and coming over for the Cannes Film Festival and meeting Prince Rainier while she was over there. Was it called The Summer Girl or something? The Country Girl, I think, something like that, the movie. Anyway, and then Paris Match arranged for them properly to meet, and they did a photo shoot of them in the Royal Palace Gardens, and then she went back to Hollywood, and and then they got married, and it was just the most incredible fairy story, and this beautiful principality. And that is what Monaco is all about. It's about that and the Hôtel de Paris. Speaking of which, I know I'm going off a lot of tangents here. I do not understand why, opposite the Hôtel de Paris, a couple of years ago, they knocked down that beautiful Café de Paris, which was a lovely 20s sort of Poirot cafe opposite the Hôtel de Paris, knocked it down, and now it's just a sort of empty area with a fountain. What was that all about? What is that all about? I just don't get it. That was a beautiful building. It's gone. Anyway, seen a lot of that in Monaco, haven't we? So, yeah, we've got all that heritage. So what we want to do then is make sure we get a feel for that heritage every time we come to Monaco. And yes, we don't need to keep going to flashbacks and Grace Kelly and all the rest of it, but what we can do, as I said at the start, is start bringing other human beings into the Monaco story, human beings that are doing the job in Formula One today, and make the Monaco TV show completely different from all the others on the Grand Prix calendar with all this background stuff. And I mentioned to Cameron, 1939 Belgian Grand Prix, sadly the race in which he was killed. Richard Seaman invited, or he was approached by, I don't think it was Paris Match on reflection. It might have been, but it was a very big magazine at the time, to see whether they could send a photographer and basically go through the weekend with him. And he said, yeah, no problem at all. And there are great pictures in the book, the George Monkhouse book. There are wonderful photographs of Richard, getting up in the morning, shaving, doing all sorts of things that you never saw from that period of time, and going to the track and everything. And sadly, as he lost his life in that race. So those pictures are incredibly poignant. But how many fans out there at the Monaco Grand Prix would like to have kind of spent the morning with Charles Leclerc on live TV? Why wouldn't Formula One do that? It's not giving away secrets from Ferrari. It's Charles, I'm sure, would be up for it. That's what I'm talking about, that package. Build it up early, and then during the race, actually have live stuff of what's going on. If there's radio transmission going, to get them mic'd up properly, and let's hear it. Let's see the faces. Let's see the eyes. Let's see what's going on. And immediately after the race, let's see some of the comments as well. That make it a completely different TV show. Don't mess around with trying to find ways to make the cars easier for overtaking. It isn't going to happen at Monaco. Whatever you do will be a quick fix, band-aid fix anyway. Get on and do something that's much more lasting and captures the weight and the intensity of that race. And Alice is absolutely right. If you said to any young driver, you could only win one Grand Prix in your life, what would it be? Some of them would choose their own home race, probably, but most of them would say the Monaco Grand Prix, I think. Alpha 007 org. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, it is. Where's it morning? It's now midday here where I am in sunny Spain. Looking forward to the Grand Prix this weekend. There's a bit of a race going on, isn't it? Because Madrid have signed Carlos Sainz as their ambassador for the future. Mad ring. And today came the news that Barcelona signed Fernando Alonso to do exactly the same thing and sustain the longevity of that race. At the moment, Barcelona is only on the calendar for sure until next year. 26 is the official last running of the Spanish Grand Prix next year at Barcelona. But of course, it could be renewed, and that's why they've hired Fernando to try and get that over the line with Liberty. 2 Spanish Grand Prix. Imagine if we had 2 Spanish Grand Prix in the context of no French Grand Prix and no German Grand Prix, given A, the economies of those 2 countries versus the economy of Spain today, and B, the history in motor racing of those 2 countries, Germany and France, compared with the history of motor racing in Spain. That's not to detract from the history of motor racing in Spain. There's been a lot. But Germany, pretty serious player in terms of motorsport over the years. France, not bad. It's where it all started. So, yeah, I think we should, before we go to 2 Spanish Grand Prix, I think we should at least have a French Grand Prix or a German Grand Prix. My friends tell me that Imola and Spa are both in trouble, and I hope they're replaced with a French or a German Grand Prix and not some other faceless circuit in the middle of nowhere. Rahan Agabal, live? Good. You're just telling me I was live. Okay. We're about 30 minutes late already on my thing. Geordie says everything's okay. Thank you. Visual Ghoul. says the wheels and cars are too big. If the cars can't overtake at Monaco, then it's the cars, not the track. Well, you're absolutely right in a way, of course. But the problem is, excuse me for doing, it's hay fever time for me again. So I keep, you know, my eyes are stinging like crazy at the moment. But I'm not going to give in to rubbing them properly. Obviously not. If the cars can't overtake at Monaco, hay fever like crazy. Actually, it reminds me, I mean, Francois Sever once got an entry in the Tim Schenken Book of Excuses by saying that he crashed his Tyrrell when some sweat got in his eye, which Ken wasn't very impressed with, Ken Tyrrell. But then there was a Jody Scheckter one. He actually sneezed in the cockpit when he shunted. That's why he shunted. Best one I heard was a mate of mine who shall remain nameless, who was racing in Japanese Super Formula and was driving back in a rush to Tokyo airport to get his flight back to Europe. And had quite a big shunt. Not his fault, because he came around a quick left-hander to find that the road cleaner was there and the road was all wet. So he completely lost the back end of this car and sideswiped a parked car, and, you know, it was a bit of a mess. And when the police came, he convinced them that it all happened because there was a bee inside the car and he was trying to sort of get rid of this bee and he didn't want to get stung. And they believed him. Great. And he did all this without actually speaking any Japanese, just all with hand signals. Can you believe it? And presumably some sound effects as well. Anyway, going back to it. See, what happens is at the start of the new formula, and we're going to a new formula in 2026, what never happens is that the teams in the FIA sit around with the Liberty people and say, right, the Monaco Grand Prix is the most important race on the calendar. We can't do without it. So first thing we must do is design a car that looks really good at Monaco and allows lots of overtaking. And once we've got that car, then we'll try and make it work on all the other tracks, the other 23 tracks. That doesn't happen. What they do, they say, we want a car that's spectacular, dramatic, and has great overtaking, and then right at the end, they think, oh, it's not going to look very good around Monaco. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. It's only one race. That's what happens. So you're absolutely right. But sadly, Monaco's at the back of the queue when it comes to priorities of how these cars should look and be. So they went to bigger wheels. The cars are heavier and bigger than ever. They weigh much more than my road car. I've said that a few times. What road car do you drive, Peter? Well, I drive a 65 Lotus Elan, thank you very much. Weighs about 700 kilos. Ricky B says, morning. Morning to you, Ricky B. Audio cutout. I hope not. Audio cutout? I don't think so. Nobody else. No sound. Oh, no. Is that right? No sound? Are you there? Hello, Peter. Stream premiere ended like Lando's hopes. When you switch to a picture, no audio. What's going on? Audio's good now. Okay. Poof. Wonder why that was. That wasn't me. I didn't touch anything. So I'm just talking about this audio. All these things, suddenly my heart stopped beating because they're saying I've been talking all this time with no audio, but everything looks perfect here. And now they're saying it's all okay. We're back. Audio's good. I didn't do anything then. So this is something to do with... In fact, my YouTube manager was telling me they're playing around a little bit with the system of how to go live. It looked the same to me, but maybe they're playing around with it a bit. Anyway, Sema Dragoon, as they say, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Monaco was ridiculous. But of course, Sema, the problem is a lot of people thought it was broken. I didn't, and you didn't, quite clearly. But a lot of people out there thought, Monaco's broken. We've got to have 2 mandatory pit stops. Ah, okay. I know what happened. Audio's muting when you show the Facebook post. And I know what that was now. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, everybody. That was that. Okay, I won't do any more of that. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, back to normal now. I know what that was. Typical, one of the classic things of going live. But you could read it while I was talking, I think, hopefully. Slippy says, you could empty the swimming pool out onto the chicane for the race. Yeah. I mean, that's a great corner, isn't it? That entry to the pool. I was thinking about that, actually. What other ways to improve Monaco in the Alex Wurz way? I mean, I did say, I think it was in the Saturday qualifying vid, when I was doing those comparison pictures of Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar, and how much more load, even though it's flat, how much load and steering Lawson's putting into that very fast left-right compared with Hajar. And that's one of the reasons Hajar's as good as he is. But Liam has the car control, not in any way decrying that side of it. But what I was thinking about was the curb they have there now. And they're flat through there probably because these cars are so good and they have so much downforce. But they're also flat because they do have curb there. And the corner's actually more open than it used to be. And if you took the curb away from there, I mean, why wouldn't they do that? Why did they put the curb in there? I'm just trying to think why. Only because they thought it was too dangerous, I guess. And a lot of people would just hit that apex curb, they could misjudge it slightly and have a massive shunt. So to stop that happening, we put curb in there. But isn't that wrong? Isn't that what we should be looking for at Monaco? I mean, if we have places like Mirabeau, where you're braking downhill quite quickly into that right-hander, where there's, you know, yeah, there's a bit of curb, but not much on the inside. Why have we given them so much curb going into the pool there? Why not make that a bit more demanding now, so it isn't absolutely flat? And that was one thing that occurred to me. But, you know, I suppose, again, the powers that be would say, well, whether it's flat or not flat, it's not entertaining. That's not the show. Yeah, maybe I'm too much of a purist in that area. I don't know. Okay, here's another suggestion. Home email. Make the chicane after the tunnel a left-hand, right-hand chicane, so you can go either way. They're both identical in shape, but the right-hand one will put on the outside of turn 12. Don't quite understand that. You're saying so you can go either way. So you can actually choose which side you want to go, and then crash into the car as you're coming out. Isn't that what George did? Kind of. Warland. I never rated George Russell, but his idea about a glorified qualifying sounds cool. I don't know what that was, but I'm assuming George has said, well, as the race is defined by qualifying, why don't we just give the points for qualifying and make it a much bigger deal? And I think he's probably right. You know, that's in a way, that's what Monaco is. But we've got to have a Grand Prix because that's what television and the money and the business requires, obviously. But, oh, you never rated George Russell? Why not? George Russell's unbelievably good, unbelievably quick, and has been ever since he's been racing karts, for Pete's sake. Ever since then, anyone that doesn't rate George really hasn't been watching. He's incredibly quick. And I loved his attitude in the race. You know, he just thought this is all so boring, so ridiculous. And I love the fact, you know, he's big mates with Alex Albon, and yet, you know, he had to say that in the race. Good luck to him. In fact, my whole respect for George continues to climb. I think he's a really good bloke. We need smaller cars back, says Abdullah Al-Mazorei. Well, yeah, we do. That ain't going to happen. You repeated it twice. Just make sure I don't miss it. Rasmus Breck. Hey, Peter, could you tell us about your time at Williams, how you started, what you did there when you left? I'd love to hear more about it. Have a good day. Well, you're probably the only one, Rasmus, but I'll have a very, very quick go at the risk of boring everybody else. When I came over from Australia as a young punk, just wanting, if I could, see if I could get a job in motor racing as a cook or a truck driver or a mechanic or whatever, I was actually a journalist because it seemed to be a bit easier than doing all that other stuff. I came via the South African Grand Prix, and that's the first race I covered actually for Autosport, 72 South African Grand Prix. And I was introduced by my mentor, David Phipps, very good journalist, photojournalist, immediately to everybody. Mario Clay, Jackie Ickx, Colin Chapman, Ken Tyrrell, Frank Williams. And Frank, I had a sort of slight contact with. I'd never met him, but Jeffrey Sykes, who ran Warwick Farm, with the circuit on which I grew up really in Sydney, incredibly good circuit. Jeffrey Sykes, the best of all racing promoters I think ever. Not promoter, organizer would be the right word. Knew Frank reasonably well. Frank had been out a couple of times for the Tasman. I never actually got to see him or meet him. And so I mentioned Jeff Sykes' name when I met Frank Williams. And he said, oh, yes, I know Jeff. Yeah, good man. And we were just chatting away. And then a couple of times I was out running around the track early evenings, and Frank would be there, and we just started our friendship then really started running around racetracks of the world together, and it became a bit of a sort of thing that we did for a long time. And then fast forward to 1979, early 77. And I'm still at Autocar magazine now, sports editor of Autocar. And Frank rang me and invited me to lunch at the Steering Wheel Club, a wonderful club that used to exist in Mayfair, London, which was nothing but steering wheels from great Grand Prix cars, including the mashed up, bent steering wheel from Innes Island's Lotus 19 that he crashed at a circuit called Marlborough, I think. It was a UDT 19 he was driving. He had a big shunt, something broke, I think. The steering wheel was like this, and that was the one on the door as you went in. Anyway, there were incredible steering wheels there, and badges and photographs. Just a wonderful place. And many Grand Prix drivers went to the Steering Wheel Club and just sort of socialise. And anyway, I had lunch there with Frank. And in it, he said, Peter, I'm going to leave Walter Wolf and I'm going to set up my new team, reboot everything, going to get a March, Patrick Nave, and we're going to start again. I've got a great new engineer, guy I met at Wolf, Patrick Head, and I'd like you to help me with the sponsorship and put the money together for this. And so, of course, I said, yeah. I said, Frank, I'm working for Autocar. I said, no, that's good. Get them to continue to pay you, but I'll make sure that we remain friends. In other words, and so I did. And I helped put that whole sponsorship package together for him, which basically came to light in '78, because Patrick Nave brought his own money to the team for '77. But '78 was when we put the Saudi Arabian Airlines and Al Bilad and a few of the other big sponsors on the car, and then, so I worked with all of that with Frank while I was still a journalist. And then in back end of 84, all that time I did work for Frank. I was also then starting to manage Nigel Mansell and Carlos Reutemann. I was already managing Reutemann actually when I met Frank that time at the Steering Wheel Club. And then I helped, obviously, Carlos go to Williams, and then always kept Frank abreast of what Nigel was doing. And then in 84, he asked me to join the team full time to run sponsorship for him, because Sheridan Thin was leaving to go to work for CSS. And I did, I joined. And then Sheridan actually came back. And so Sheridan was my senior, and I had no problem with that. But my title was sponsorship and public affairs for that period of time, working with Frank. And then back end of 88, I decided to try and do my own F1 team, which I think could have been really good. Greg Norman, the golfer, was involved. It was to buy Brabham. He was going to be like a roving chairman of Brabham, Australian. And we had Sergio Rinland, John Baldwin doing cars at Chessington. I hired Martin Brundle as the driver with Stefano Modena in the other car. But then I got screwed legally by one of the Swiss people involved and had to take them to court. So I basically took a year and a half out of Formula One suing everybody, and won. And then what did I do then? And then in that time I went back to, and in that time actually, I helped Enrique Scalabroni go to Ferrari as technical director when John Barnard left, and he did a really good job on Barnard's car to take it up to the front of the grid. And because in its last race in 89, it was sort of midfield, not quite a difficult car, but by the time it hit the road in 90 and 91, or 90, it was a really, really good car. And that was a year of Mansell and Prost, of course. And then I did that for a year. I set up GTO Ferrari's English operation when Barnard left, and took all the employees except one with him. Two, I think it was actually. Ian Thompson stayed. I knew Ian from Williams. He was a composites guy, really good technical, really good designer, technician, engineer. And Pasquale and Dave Cooper in the fab shop were the only two left in the fab or machine shop. So we had three people there. And so I had to get a whole team of people together to build 5 Formula One cars to the new Scalabroni spec for the first Grand Prix, and indeed for the first Goodyear tests, which were only like 6 weeks away. So that was an interesting year. And then in the middle of all that, Frank asked me to go back as race team manager, test team manager for 91, which I did. And then we won the championship in 92. And then I've been, floating around ever since, doing lots of things. Anyway, that's it in a nutshell. I said I wouldn't spend too long on it, but thanks for asking the question. Very kind, very flattered that you asked that. Zishan Afsal. Hello, Peter. Norris looked more dialed in and quicker than Piastri over the whole weekend. What's the fundamental difference between their driving styles? Well, I did actually try to spend a lot of time analysing the two of them in my videos from Monaco. So at the risk of being boring, particularly the video from Saturday, go back, or even Friday for that matter. I did a big analysis of them through Rascasse. So go back and look at those. Lando does what he always does very well. He's very soft touch, very, very good use of the car in front and rear, not turning in as early as Max or Charles. And he has the talent to do that, but he just doesn't do it. But he turns in a little, he's using the front end more than Piastri on a circuit like Monaco. Bear in mind, Norris has always been very, very good on street circuits, going back to his Formula 3 days at Pau. And he's very good at using the front end. And whereas Piastri was, I think, quite good, but he's just got so much into this rhythm of driving on the rear of the car now. In my mind, I was wondering if Monaco, with the championship lead he's got and the success he's had, whether he might then start to have a go at early turn-in again. But he didn't. He just stuck with it, and he's just driving on the rear, which is why you saw quite a lot of moments throughout the weekend of him in oversteer slides in a way Lando never was. And Lando was using the front more. He was really accentuating the suppleness and softness of his touch compared with Piastri's. And then finally, I think mentally he switched off from social media and did what I've been saying for the last 6 months he should do, which is just focus on his side of the garage, stay calm in his own bubble of operation, and get on with it. And when Piastri went off on Saturday, was it Friday? Was it? I can't remember now. He went off at Saint-Devote, took the front. When he didn't go down the escape road, he hit the barrier. You know, that was a moment when I think Lando felt, yeah, you know, Piastri makes mistakes too. And that was a moment when I think the weekend came together for him. And he just stayed very calm throughout. Really good. And I think if you can be that calm under pressure in the closing seconds of Q3 at Monaco, it's probably the most pressure-packed moment a Grand Prix driver can feel other than a race, then I think he's in good stead now for the rest of the year. And I think it's a different mindset, different approach, and he's allowing his natural things that he does really well to come to the surface again. So it's good to see it. Darwin Life doesn't like my idea. He says, I don't want to listen to the chatter. I want good racing. Well, in that case, don't watch Monaco, because you're never going to have good racing at Monaco. And that's all I can say. There is no solution. So long as we have these cars and so long as we have the Monaco Grand Prix, they're completely incompatible. So if you don't want the chatter, that's fine. I totally get it. But I think given the success of the Netflix show, a lot of people do want the chatter. Kamikaze, does Oscar Piastri have a championship mentality? Yeah, absolutely. Of course he does. He's a Jack Brabham type Aussie racer, Aussie grit racer, and there'll be moments when he's appearing to be super calm. And Lando again has a moment. This isn't all over by any means. It's just that around Monaco, Lando was exceptionally good. Well, around Monaco, Lando had a showpiece track on which to display what he can do well to himself. I'm not talking about, you know, to the outside world, to himself. He knew around Monaco there were places where he'd be able to use the front end of the car very well, whereas Oscar wouldn't. I'm not sure around Barcelona whether he'll have any technical driving advantage over Piastri. I don't think he will. Maybe out of 2. That's about it. 2 into 3. But he might have an advantage. But I don't think he'll be much slower than Piastri, if at all. And he might actually be slightly quicker if Piastri doesn't have a perfect run. I think he's right there with him on circuits like Barcelona and Silverstone, Canada. All the circuits coming up, they'll be very, very evenly matched now. Very. And I think Lando's probably got over the mentality issue that he had. And Piastri will just be strong. He'll shrug off Monaco. Yeah, didn't have a great weekend, still finished 3rd. Pretty good. Yeah, no worries. And he'll go to Barcelona and be thinking only of winning for sure. Jules Mack, you see, this is in contrast to Darwin Life, says, I'd love to hear some of the pit stop commentary, especially when they go wrong, but also if they have a record pit stop. Yeah, I agree. You know, why don't we hear that? And when somebody does a 1.9, let's hear all that stuff. You know, see the faces of the mechanics. It's not enough to have one of those helmet cams on the mechanic where you're sort of all over the place. You don't know what's going on. It needs to be a proper bit of TV production, film production. You know, bring Spielberg in to do Monaco for us every year. That would be the way to do it. Spielberg or, you know, any of those good guys. Ron Smith. I think you have to keep Monaco, but I'd change it to a time trial. I'd have qualifying on Saturday with half points. Sunday I'd have one lap shootout, qualifying with half points. Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, Ron, but then think of, Jack Brabham winning the 59 Monaco Grand Prix with his feet second-degree burns because of the heat from the radiator. Think of Sterling Moss's wins against the Ferraris. Think of Bruce McLaren winning there in 62. Think of Graham Hill in 65. Think of all the great wins we've had in the last decade there. You can't just throw away all that history and say no more Monaco Grand Prix. We're just going to have single lap qualifying on Sunday. We just can't do it. I just think it would be complete and utter disservice to the sport and everything it stands for to do that. I totally understand why you think that way, because qualifying actually is the race. But at the same time, it's race day, it's race day at Monte Carlo. And that's what we still have to have, I think. Susie Perry, I don't like the idea of milking up the teams. Really don't think that would work. It would end up with them all talking in code like plan C this, etc. The end result is just more boring. I'm not talking about strategy. I'm talking about real life. And that's why I say, we need to be miking up Charles Leclerc's group and Lando's group. And we need to be miking up, I don't know, anybody of interest. Of course, in terms of strategy, it's going to be plan C, plan D. But believe me, there's a lot of stuff that you can get engineers to say and capture and bleep out if you've got a sharp director. Could easily be done. And you'd get all the emotion then. I mean, at the end of the race, it was a bit of a tense interaction, I think, between Lewis and his engineer, Riccardo Adami. And that was Lewis saying quite correctly, how much margin have I got, I think, or what's the gap to the guy behind, and Riccardo telling him what tyres everybody was on. And Lewis coming back saying, well, that's not the information I want. I want to know what the gap is, please. And that moment, that's nothing to do with plan C, plan D, plan A. At that moment, that would be really good television to focus in on Riccardo, where he's going, caramba, or whatever he's doing, saying, I've misheard Lewis, or what is this guy thinking? Why is he asking me at this stage? Whatever he's thinking, which is all a very odd communication, the whole thing anyway, wasn't it? Whatever he's thinking, let's capture it on TV. That's what I'm saying. So I Susie, I understand what you mean by all that, but there are lots of things we could show which don't come under the heading of Plan A, Strategy G. Ron Smith, I don't think it matters with Netflix. They can skip whole races and Monaco gives good B-reel, so they like it regardless. Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. I'm not quite sure. But I mean, obviously F1 is concerned because they keep trying to change Monaco. So they think there's something wrong about Monaco regarding the TV show. So we've got to assume that's a given. And you go on to say, Ron, it's more about the live broadcast and people switching off because nothing happens on track. Well, that's right. Because, we expect too much from all this artificial DRS stuff that they come to Monaco and they think we've got to have the same overtaking. But to me, overtaking, again, isn't what it's all about anyway. It's about all the other things that are part of Formula One. And Imola was a great Grand Prix, in my opinion. Not a lot of overtaking in it, but it was a great Grand Prix. And I hope all the people that were producing that and, commentating that made that point. Susie Perry says, hi, Peter. I arrived from Netflix. It took me 6 months to figure out what DRS was, and they kept talking about it. I watch all the Grand Prix from start to finish to answer your question. I'm hooked. Well, that's good. It's good to hear. And DRS, of course, is the dismissal referral system used in cricket throughout the world, isn't it? I'm only joking. It is, of course, in this case, the drag reduction system. Chris McClellan, hi Peter, completely agree with you. There's so much untapped potential that the TV broadcast could be. So already we're getting sort of 50-50 input here, aren't we? Secondly, how would you feel about having Monaco as a time trial format, fastest 5 lap run, etc.? Yeah, I mean, I've said what I've said. I think the Grand Prix has got to be a Grand Prix. Apart from anything else, you want the start. You want all the cars rushing down into Saint-Devote. But please take into account my other big request, which is that the pole winner can choose which side he wants to start the race from. It's such a logical thing. I don't understand why we throw that incredible opportunity for great television down the drain without even considering it. And now, Lando, you've got the pole at Monaco, the big moment. What side of the grid do you want to start from tomorrow? Oh, I don't know. Come on, you've got 30 seconds. It would be really good. And my bet is he probably would have chosen the left. because it is slightly cleaner there. And you can see everybody on the left side has more grip than everybody on the right. Yeah, on the right, he's got the inside run into Sandervoort, and it's a relatively short run. But as we saw in the F2 race, it only takes the guy on the pole to make a mediocre start, and the guy on the left just to make a normal start, for the guy on the left actually to be in front by the time you get to the braking area of Sandervoort. And whilst that, a lot of people might say, oh, great television, massive, multi-car shunt, mega. I'm sure the teams didn't think so, the amount of damage that was done needlessly. And equally, I think that moment of the driver choosing is a great moment. Yeah, Spanish Grand Prix, no brainer. Obviously, you want the clean side of the road, but there will be others. Austin's another good example. You may, if you're on the pole, you may not want to be on the left in Austin. I think you'd want to be on the right, on the clean side of the road, rather than the inside, because there's a lot of grip at the top there on the outside anyway. So I think they should bring that in. Siggy. Wasn't rule change at Monaco essentially Formula One opening up the floodgates by essentially admitting that Monaco isn't a good race? Well, I think everybody has known, anybody who's been watching Formula One with even the passing interest would know that Monaco's, everybody keeps saying a good race, and they're saying a good race in the context of overtaking. I keep making the point, you can have a great race with very little overtaking. And you'd probably find a lot of people who spent a lot of money at Monaco this year and stayed in the Hotel de Paris at 10,000 euros a night or whatever it was, 20,000 probably, and went to the yacht that they'd rented on the Sunday and were down there watching it from the inside of Tabac. By the time they got to Nice Airport on Monday, probably not even at Nice Airport, probably just at the commercial, bit where the private aircraft are, would say, what a weekend. Absolutely love that weekend. What a mega weekend. What a great race. That's probably they would have been saying, because that's what they went to Monaco for. They didn't go there to see 27 place changes. They went there because it was Monaco. And that's why I say we shouldn't play around with that. It's never going to be any different. Just enhance the show for the television viewers. That's what we need to do. Nick, hi Peter, do you think the reason Kimi Raikkonen was so good was partly due to his lack of talking to the media, like you say Lando should do? Obviously, he was also massively talented on top of that. Yeah, I do. I think Kimi was, it was a different thing for Kimi because he just didn't want to talk to the media. Didn't want to do, I mean, social media wasn't really around when he was at his peak. So it wasn't really an issue for him. And yeah, the less he could have to deal with people, the better. And he was, and because of that, he was quite single-minded and he was very focused when he got into the zone of the race car, the garage, and getting out and doing the job. But I remember once, and for those that have heard this story before, my apologies, but it's a while since I've told it. But I remember once going to David Coulthard's end-of-year party in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and it started at something like 1 in the morning. So we were all absolutely shattered by the time it started, let alone finished. And I was there, and I remember there was a sort of, you go up to a second level, and you could look down at effectively everybody on the ground floor drinking and dancing and doing all that stuff. And there was this sort of railing, and there were 3 or 4 of us standing there, and I was just looking down, wondering how long I was going to stay. And I looked across, and Kimi was standing next to me. Oh, that's Kimi. Hey, Kimi, how you doing? Good job, mate. Or whatever I said. And he looked at me and he said, I hate Formula One. And then just walked away. And I thought, wow, that's very cool. Good. And I think that sums Kimi up, really. I don't think he actually enjoyed Formula One at all, apart from driving the racing cars. And I think that's probably why he was so good for a very short period. He was brilliant, wasn't he? And that's kind of how Lando has to be. He doesn't have to hate Formula One, that's for sure. But as I said yesterday on the Cameron show, one thing that always stuck in my mind reading about it at the time was when Jimmy Connors was up there against Borg and McEnroe, how Connors never wanted to stay even in the same hotel as the guys he was going to have to play against. He didn't want to see their faces. He just wanted to work with his own little team, get out there, do his own practice on his own schedule away from when they were not practicing, and then just come out and beat them. That was his attitude. And I, diluted into a Formula One methodology, that's what I think Lando should be doing this year in order to win in order to beat Oscar Piastri to win the championship. That's the point. It's not in order to beat Max Verstappen, it's in order to beat Oscar Piastri, because Oscar's his biggest rival by a million miles. if you're talking about how can Lando win the championship this year, I think he has to have that attitude. And I think the first step, and it's a major step, is getting rid of social media on that. Hamad Belhaji. Hi, Peter. Super idea you have there. Maybe like Deadly's catch on Discovery would be something special. Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you. You know, I think more people will suddenly get over 50% now saying it's a great idea. Now, Susie's coming back, giving me a hard time because she's a Netflix viewer. It's wrong to assume that because we approve Netflix, we are shallow. I mean, I love watching you when you're there, multiple channels offering Formula One commentary, and I have picked to listen to you. Yeah, no, I'm not in any way saying you're shallow. All I'm saying is that the Netflix viewers, including you, Susie, came into Formula One from a different angle to the people who are making the rules about Formula One at the moment. That's the point. And I think you're so used, not you, I don't want to talk about you specifically, but you generically, Netflix generation, are so used to Formula One doing all it can to encourage overtaking and having not 2 DRS zones, but 3 DRS zones and longer straights to have more overtaking, that has become the sort of way you look at Formula One. And suddenly Monaco comes on the calendar and DRS has no effect at all, and everybody goes around in single file, and a lot of people say, wow, this is boring. I'm saying there is no way to solve that in terms of the car and the racetrack. The only way to solve that is to change the production of that one race and give the viewers a touch of what Monaco is away from the racetrack while the track is going on. When I say away from the racetrack, I mean in the pit lane, and I mean with good Formula One people being featured and mic'd up, and the driver's briefing and all the other stuff. You know, you can have the officials, you can have the whole race control thing properly mic'd up as well. Alpha 007 org. If you go to Monte Carlo to watch the race there and you see all those yachts, bodyguards, you start to understand why Monaco will never go away. Yeah. And note, of course, that and this is for anyone that thinks we should get rid of that slow chicane and have a really fast chicane. Note that we still have that tradition. It's a tradition now, I guess, of all the boats having to go back, what, probably 100 meters from the water, like 2 hours before the race. So in case a race car does go into the harbour, it doesn't hit a boat. That's still there. Ron Smith, this is an answer to my point, or Enzo Ferrari's point of 60-40. He says, there are times when it's probably 80% car, but at the moment I'd say closer to 60, as the regulations are so close. Yeah, 80% car. Let me think about that. Yeah, of course there are situations when, if you take turbos versus normally aspirated engines in the same race, when the turbos had like 200 horsepower more, of course, that was worth more than 60%. You can get artificial things like that. Mario Andretti and Ronnie Peterson in 1978 with the ground effect Lotus 79 versus everybody else, yeah. But maybe McLaren now with the massive amount of downforce they got on the MCL 39. I'm only joking there. But yeah, I mean, Lando said, didn't he say not so long ago, I wish Max could drive the McLaren because then he'd see that it's no, you know, walk in the park. Personally, I just don't buy that. I think Max in a McLaren would be quicker than both Oscar and Lando. But that's what Lando thinks. You know, then we'll always have this argument in the pub, won't we? You know, how much of it is car, how much of it is driver, and how much difference can a great driver make to a team? And what would, you know, here's a good question. What would Max do in a Racing Bulls around Barcelona? Would he be quicker than Isaac Hadjar in a Red Bull? That's, you know, interesting, isn't it? Probably would be, I think. Jules Mac. I think in regards to team info becoming public, the teams would want to delay like at least a year or two until the season starts. Yeah, but this is why I say you've got to be managing this thing from the top, and it's got to be in the Concord Agreement for one race. Again, I don't in any way want to take away the team's ability to have advantages through secret information. That should not be tampered with, of course. But actually seeing what that secret information is what department of the car we're talking about, is at least a major step in the right direction. I mean, if we know, for example, that the amount of compliance in the suspension around Monaco over the curbs is a really critical factor, more than ever before, given the ground effect, you know, of these cars, then that's a subject around which you can build up a really good story, and you can bring in an engineer who's an expert on that sort of thing, and how you potentially you can give more suspension travel to the car for the curbs at Monaco without affecting the center of pressure, whatever it is you want to talk about. I'm not saying that would be used during the race, but what I'm saying is that when the teams, when Max is saying effectively to his engineer, well, you know, I've got to the limit of the car. If you want me to be quicker, you're going to have to give me more curb. I'm going to have to be able to use more curb. When he's saying that, you could bleep out a few things. You could make it a little bit different. You could make sure, and Max would know that he's mic'd up anyways. He's not going to give away a lot of secrets. You could do it in such a way that, you know, oh yeah, he's in the suspension thing again, and then everybody knows what's going on. Then basically, that's what I'm saying. The moment you come in and it's just saying, oh, is that mysterious office upstairs where it all happens, and then the cars go out, they all look the same, but magically some of them are much quicker than others. Nobody has any idea what's going on. Let's, for this one race, open things up a bit. And let's face it, Monaco's a bit of a technical anomaly anyway. It's not exactly giving away a lot of secrets in terms of where they're going with downforce for the next race or whatever, or in Canada. Monaco is all about traction, it's all about good braking, it's all about suspension compliance, and it's about good driving, obviously. And I don't think it's difficult. And maybe I'm wrong, you know, I'm just throwing out an objective, hopefully an objective but personal opinion on how they could improve the show around Monaco. Zishan Afsar. Hi, Peter. What do you make of the relationship between Lewis and his race engineer, Adami? Early days, but very different compared with Lewis and Bono, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, Michael was lucky, wasn't he? Because he could take all these good people with him from Benetton to Ferrari. And when he sat in the Ferrari, it was basically, well, this Benetton's red now. I've still got Nigel Stepney here, and Ross is there, and, you know, there's various other people. I think Johan Villeneuve was there, wasn't he? I think at that point as well. So, yeah, Rory Byrne. These days they have all these contracts, and I guess the reason Bono didn't go to Ferrari with Lewis was because the non-complete clause thing they all have. I would guess it's that. Although, if you were Jean Todt and you thought Lewis would be better off with his engineer that he knows and loves from Mercedes, then in recent times, then you would try to make that happen, would you not? Somehow, with money under the table or something, I don't know. But on the other side of the coin, Jean Todt did have Jock Clear there, and I think correctly, and Jock's got a great history with Lewis of winning championships. Correctly, he then moved Jock from Charles' side of the garage to the sort of center of the garage, where he can do a lot more with Lewis now. And I think that's working really well. And Jock, in my opinion, is a very rare type of racing engineer, because although he is an engineer, he also has the ability to think in a very athletic way and quite a human way. And I think that's why he's had such good results over the years. And he does such a good job with the Ferrari Academy now. And, you know, there's no coincidence there. I think, you know, obviously Jock can't do everything, and they have got Ricardo there on Lewis's car in terms of the actual performance engineer. I guess that's his title, race engineer. I don't know what it is these days. And yeah, it doesn't look good, does it? It's kind of a rocky thing. And I don't understand why, you know, if Lewis asks a question about gaps, he gets a response about tires. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And if you're an engineer, I think this is one thing I'd always learned from Jock, you know, if you're an engineer, you adapt to the way the driver is as a personality and as a human being. They're all different. And Jock, when he was engineering Jacques Villeneuve, had a different approach to when he was engineering Lewis Hamilton. They're different drivers. And so I'm mystified by how and why that is happening, that lack of communication. I suppose, you know, it's frustrating for Lewis, because if he does ever look back at the Michael era at Ferrari, he might be thinking, why isn't this happening with me? And then he would think, well, look at all the people Michael brought with him. And Lewis didn't bring anybody with him, as far as I can see, apart from, you know, his physio. So he's got Jock there. He probably needs to use Jock more, I would imagine. But politically, that's probably difficult to do, I would think. So it's all up to Freddie Vasseur, really, ultimately, to call the shots and get that sorted out. Fred's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders, of course. Bigger problems than that, in a way, because he decided not to get Adrian Newey. And it was in his power to get Adrian Newey, for sure. The money would have been there eventually. If he said, we've got to have Adrian Newey, otherwise Ferrari doesn't race next year, whatever it's going to be. He didn't decide to go with Adrian Newey. And so I think everybody thought, well, you know, he knows what he's doing, ART, Sauber, the whole thing, give him the benefit of the doubt. The engineering structure that we have in terms of the design of the car is good enough. But is it? And would the team be the same now if Adrian was there? I think there'd be a very different feel to Ferrari if Adrian was at Ferrari. So that's one thing he's got to live with and he's got to justify. And then the second one, of course, is Lewis himself. And he could have, I believe, and it's only a personal opinion, he could have stopped that. He's a team principal. And if he couldn't have stopped it, then he's not team principal, really, because he should have said, no, sorry, regardless of what everybody says, I don't want this. I want to keep Carlos Sainz. I want to keep the team. Our problem is not drivers. Our problem is the car. We need to focus 100% on getting Adrian Newey. I don't want to distract. Don't want any distractions from that in talking to Lewis. I just want to get the Newey deal done. Then maybe we can look at drivers. But again, he chose to go the route he did. And for Lewis, it's a brilliant thing. I don't in any way criticize Lewis for taking the decision that he did, because he was getting nowhere at Mercedes. And who doesn't want to end their career at Ferrari and wear the red overalls and win races in a Ferrari and be in Italy and all the wonderful things? It's great. But at the time, and still it's correct to say it, Ferrari aren't lacking in drivers. They're lacking in the car. And they have Charles Leclerc and they had Carlos Sainz. And if you gave them a really good car, those two guys are both quite capable of winning a lot of Grand Prix. You didn't need Lewis to do that. But so we'll see where it goes now. It's a difficult situation. It's classic Ferrari, really. It's always different things, whether it's Enzo Ferrari in 1965 refusing to run the car in red because he's annoyed that the FIA won't let the 250LM start at Le Mans, whatever it was, you know, fighting with the FIA or the Italian Automobile Federation on the homologation of this or that, or whether it be Ferrari not entering the first Grand Prix of 1950 because there's not enough starting money from Silverstone. You know, a million things go on at Ferrari, always. And it's, in a way, it's charming, isn't it? It's what we expect from Ferrari. If they got it right every time, it'd be quite boring. But it is about time they did get it right, let's face it. And when you look at Adrian in his green overalls at Aston Martin, not overalls, shirt and cap and everything, at Aston Martin, and you look at all the money there that the Strolls keep pouring in, you think it's not going to be easy to beat Aston Martin next year, that is for sure. Honda engines, you know, and Ferrari don't have that impetus at the moment. It's kind of sad, isn't it? JS, hi Peter. Thanks for Imola Corner viewing advice. Had fabulous time. Enjoyed Jim Clark at the wheel, Cruel Sport, Checkered Year, and Unfair Advantage. Any other books you'd recommend? JS, what a man after my own heart, or lady. I think it's a man. No? I'm glad you enjoyed all of that. Thank you. Other books. Bruce McLaren, From the Cockpit. Yeah. Jack Brabham, When the Flag Drops. These were all books that were ghosted by good writers. In the case of Bruce's book by Ian Young, in Jack's case, I think Alan Brinton, but both of them written from the heart. And you really get inside the driver at the time, what he was doing. You know, Bruce breaking his legs at the German Grand Prix and going back in the back of a Sunbeam Rapier back to England. All those lovely stuff. And I have to say, Championship Year, I think, was it called? Ken Gregory's book. Ken Gregory was Sterling Moss's manager and Peter Collins' manager, actually. And he wrote a wonderful book. And I just couldn't put it down. One of the best books I've ever read in terms of feeling that you're really on the road with Sterling Moss and all the things that went on behind the scenes, all the things we talk about that should be in the Monaco Grand Prix television telecast of Sterling back in his flat and traveling here and getting fitted out with a new suit there and everything wonderful. I've forgotten the name. I'm annoyed. I think it's something to do with international motor racing, something like that. Ken Gregory, anyway, I remember the name Ken Gregory. He wrote that book, and he wrote it himself. A very good writer as well, Ken. Great man. And actually got him to sign it just before he passed away. Lovely man. Great, very talented guy as well. He partly set up BRP with Alfred Moss, you know, which certainly won non-championship Formula One races with Innes Ireland, and good Formula One team, BRP. And then finally, I would recommend Michael Collins' book. Michael was the commander of Apollo. It was the Apollo 11 command module pilot. He's the one that didn't go on the moon, but he wrote a wonderful book called Carrying the Fire. And the reason I mentioned that, it does have a motor racing connection, because it was in South Africa. I guess it was about 1979, 80. And I was sharing a room with Charlie Crichton Stewart of the Williams team, who's a very, very good friend of Frank's and very close to Alan Jones, and just a really all-round brilliant driver himself. Formula 3, won a lot of races. Lovely guy. Previously married to a really good actress as well. And anyway, really great guy, cool guy. And he was reading this book. I said, "What are you reading, Charlie?" He said, "Oh, I'm reading Carrying the Fire. I can't put it down. Unbelievable book." And when Charlie Crichton Stewart says that, you think this has got to be a good book. And yeah, sure it is. So I would read Carrying the Fire if you haven't read it as well. I didn't get Michael Collins to sign that. I wrote to him once congratulating him on the book and how wonderful it was. I didn't get a reply, actually. I wrote to him care of NASA. But anyway, I hope he got it. I hope he got the letter. Chris McClellan, and not worry about the race. Could also, in addition, have a 2-hour session, say the fastest single lap time. Could be in a 1 attempt. Yeah. I just don't think it's going to be feasible to have the Monaco Grand Prix as single lap qualifying. Not when you've got the Indy 500 to watch that night as well. Congratulations, by the way, to Alex Palou. Brilliant. I still can't, you know, Spanish Grand Prix, Barcelona, GP3. I remember chatting to Adrian Campos Sr. and introducing me to Alex Palou. Brilliant young Spanish driver, he said, who has no money, but I'm going to put him in the car because he's got so much talent. I don't know how many years ago that was now. It's a long time ago. A typical example, you know, there's a guy like Campos who knew what he was doing. Formula One took no interest in Alex Palou at all. Goes to America and shows everybody how good he is. He should be in Formula One, no question. Anyway, typical Formula One. Mr. Ninja Fish, BBC Horizon documentary. That was late 80. Yeah, what was it? Well, the one with Alan Jones, Alan Jones in the wallet was definitely in an 07, so it wouldn't have been late 80, 90. Oh, late 1980. Sorry, you meant late 80s. You meant 1980. Yeah, there you go. Late 1980. Warlund says, you think Riccardo Adami will get fired or need English lessons? Now, come on. Be nice now. Kamikaze, who will win the World Drivers' Championship? Oscar, Lando or Max? Well, I was asked this question before the season started, and I said Max, with McLaren winning the Constructors' Championship. So on the basis that, unlike some American politicians out there, I'm going to stick with what I said. I'm going to say Max still. It's a big ask right now, I agree. But who knows? Spanish Grand Prix this weekend, new flexi wing rigs. McLaren will probably still be incredibly quick. But we'll see. Maybe Red Bull, maybe Ferrari, maybe Mercedes, who are a little bit nearer to McLaren. Let's wait and see. Mr. Ninja Fish, that old Equinox documentaries are utter kino, much better than the ones chock full of music. Oh, well, you don't like music then, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Patrick Uden knew how to make... You know, Patrick Uden once made a documentary about the flowers that grew in the median strips of the motorways of the United Kingdom. That's a fairly esoteric subject, and he made it incredibly interesting. Last time I saw Patrick, we met at a very cool, his choice, very cool coffee shop in Soho, and he rode up on his bike as he would, but it wasn't just any bike. It was a sort of 1923, blah, 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 perfect. And he's actually got an app. He's got an app about classic bicycles. So there you go. Kabilo Ndibali. Hi, Peter. Do you think Oscar has higher potential than Lando, or will he be faster this year? Well, I kind of look above the answer I gave to that previous question. If you weren't there, I just think that Lando does have a softer touch. He uses the front end of the car more, which does help him on circuits like Monaco, and probably will help him on a circuit like Silverstone. I think Lando's biggest problem has been more of a mental thing so far, but I think he kind of broke the back of that at the Monaco Grand Prix. And I think now with Lando, in theory, with a clearer mindset of what he's expecting of himself and the car and the team and how he's going to get the best from those three components, I think he'll be right there with Oscar. I don't think he'll ever dominate Oscar any more than I think Oscar will now dominate Lando. I think it'll be very close. And, you know, I wouldn't like to be the guy who's got the master plan of how he's going to manage those two in terms of not taking points from one another. The only way to do it is what they do at the moment, which is cop out and say, oh, well, it's all good for the Constructors' Championship. Yeah, right. We all know that the real thing is the drivers. And, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult because they're trying to be mates. They're trying to be in this sort of glad, happy team where everybody works as one and everybody's happy. But as I say, if Lando wants to beat Oscar, Oscar's good enough to require Lando to have a completely different, very selfish mindset now. And by selfish, I don't mean doing annoying things on the racetrack and disobeying team orders. What I mean is just looking after his side of the garage, thinking of himself only and not looking across all the time, which inevitably he did because Oscar was so quick. He never had to do that when he had Ricciardo in the other car. Mario Mosco. Hi, Peter. Why does winning Le Mans or Daytona not give credit anymore? Alonso is a two-time Le Mans winner and a Daytona winner. Nobody seems to care. They only recognise his two Formula One championships. What you're saying is, why does nobody care about anything other than Formula One? Because, yep, Le Mans has a big crowd and probably quite good television. I'm not sure how big the television is. It's probably quite big at the start and maybe the finish, but in 3 o'clock in the morning, I can't imagine it's that big. But a big crowd, obviously. And then what else has a crowd in WEC? Not many circuits. Most of them have empty grandstands. Same with F2, F3. If ever you ran an F2 and F3 race away from a Grand Prix track, nobody in the grandstands. And equally, even in the mornings when they run early, nobody in the grandstands. And then you've got other forms of motorsport. Equally, nobody's watching. I mean, I'm going to the Rally of Sardinia in 10 days because I just want to be there to watch those cars on those dirt roads, on the gravel. But not that many people, apart from Sardinians themselves, will be there, I think. I can't imagine many F1 people will be there. None, probably. And that's a great shame. And why is that the case? I'll tell you why it's the case. Because Bernie and Max decided long ago, when they were putting, you know, in one of their many meetings, wherever, probably with Flav in attendance as well, that one of the ways forward for Formula One not only was to ensure that everybody had to design and build their own cars at vast expense, or that you had to do every race rather than just pick and choose at vast expense, or had to run 2 cars at every race at vast expense, build up this whole barrier around Formula One. But in addition, take as much publicity as you possibly can from all the other forms of motor racing and focus it all on Formula One. And they did. And that's the business model that has now been inherited by the next generation. There is no interest outside Formula One in anything. And to survive in WEC, still, you have to have, yeah, there are some manufacturers in there. There's too many, probably. But there's a lot of amateur drivers putting a lot of their own personal money in there. And that's the same, you know, F2, F3, when they decided to take over F2 and F3 and incorporate them into the Formula One package, there was on the basis of F2 and F3 should take as minimum amount of publicity from Formula One. They should have their own paddock area, their own one hospitality area. They're not allowed to do their own hospitality or entertain their own sponsors in their own way. It has to be done in a communal way. Very limited on the number of passes they get to get into the Formula One paddock. Keep them away as much as possible. All that was just to keep the whole focus on Formula One. And when they were said, well, how are we going to pay for it, or how are they going to get the sponsors? The reply was always, well, enough rich daddies out there to pay for it all. You know, let them do it. Let them sort it out. And they were right. There are, incredibly. And of course, there are exceptions. There are drivers with massive amounts of talent and no money, and they have put packages together. They've been lucky enough to work with an F1 team who have helped them do that. But by and large, it's very, very difficult for an F3 team or an F2 team or a WEC team to go out there and get a commercial sponsor on the basis of the amount of television exposure and other benefits, fringe benefits they're going to give that sponsor. Very, very difficult. Relatively easy to do that for Formula One. And that's the way it is. Formula One, in its success, has killed the rest of motorsport in terms of the exposure that it can get on television. Sad but true. And it would be really nice, you know, in a perfect world, maybe a different FIA presidency, the whole thing, if the emphasis was on how we're going to really open up motorsport outside Formula One. Very difficult thing to do because F1 is so immersed with the FIA in everything it does and the contract they have and the commercial rights and everything, that F1 is always going to be expecting the FIA to favour what they're doing in their business model. So that's why they did that for 100 years, wasn't it? So we're kind of locked into that now. It's never going to change. And if you look at, somebody was asking about Alex Wurz earlier. Alex Wurz put a massive amount of money into his very talented sons to get as far as they could in motorsport. But they're not in F2 now. And yet drivers, if you take Max Esterton, was Alex's teammate in F3, but he's not in F2, and Max is now in F2. Alex isn't in F2, or Alex Jr. Is it Alex? I think so. I can't remember. Anyway, his son is not in F2. And that's going to be money, for sure. And it's a great shame. It's all about money. And Formula One's taken it all, basically. Arav Kumar. Hi, Peter. Yesterday I went to see the Formula One exhibition in Amsterdam. It was an amazing experience. Thanks for all your hard work. Well, thank you very much. Yep, that's easy to say, you know, thank you very much. Obviously, it's a massively large team of people that do all that. And we're looking forward to the future with it as well. It was a really interesting thing to do because it meant delving into a lot of Formula One's heritage and trying to make it palatable for today and tomorrow. And hopefully in some small way we've done that. And in my personal case, it meant I think we did over 80 interviews with different people, with a very good team of people. I worked with Jam, and that was great, you know. And to say Tony Brooks before he passed away, or Eddie Jordan, and we've got them there for posterity now. I've got Tony Brooks talking about the 55 Syracuse Grand Prix, winning in the Connaught and changing the face of Formula One as he did so, because that effectively was the first big British win since Seagrave's win in 1920s in the French Grand Prix. I think it was France, might have been Spain. Anyway, it was a long time since a British win in Grand Prix racing, and have Tony reflect on that. I told this story then when Tony came to our studios and we interviewed him. Tony Brooks, for those who don't know, one of the great Grand Prix drivers, very mildly mannered, very polite, very articulate. He was a dentist, and he started life as a dental student and finished life as a dentist as well, and had a car dealership. Lovely man, very humble, but incredibly quick, particularly somewhere like Spa. He was up there with Sterling Moss in Van Wall's. He was really quick, and he was a major part of Van Wall's championship success in '58 when they won the Constructors' Championship. Anyway, Tony arrived and got out of the car we'd sent to his home to bring him up into London to the studio. And I was chatting to him over a coffee before we sat down to do the interview. And I said, are you still driving on the road, Tony? Because he was a bit fragile, a bit doddery. And I shouldn't use that word really with Tony Brooks, but he was a little bit, slightly. He said, yes, of course I am, as he would. I said, oh, what are you driving? He said, oh, I'm driving an AMG 6.3. I said, really? Wow, that's amazing. I said, do you ever get the back end out? Do you push it a bit hard? He said, of course I do. What a ridiculous question. Brilliant. I love it. Tony Brooks, what a driver. So yeah, I'm glad you went to the Amsterdam. Glad you enjoyed it. Oscar the dog, Violent Winston says, yeah, well, he is a dog, isn't he? That's what Lando needs to realise if he wants to beat him. Otherwise, Oscar's going to be world champion. He's quite capable of winning the world championship, Oscar Piastri. He has the demeanour, he has the character, he has the talent, he has the team. What else do you need, you know? And the motivation. Nicola Losa. Hi, Peter. How good was Olivier Gendebien? Some say he was rated as the best GT driver of his epoch. Yeah, he was extremely good. Olivier Gendebien. Very good Formula One driver too. I mean, I think he finished 4th in the 61 French Belgian Grand Prix in the Equipe Nationale Belge Ferrari Sharknose, painted yellow. Obviously, the factory cars, the red cars were there. There was a big dice between Phil Hill and Taffy von Trips and Richie Ginther, but Gendebien was right up with them at Spa. And he had some other good Grand Prix as well. But he was very good in 275 GTB Ferraris, things like that, Tour de France, Le Mans. Very, very good. And a very intelligent guy, eloquent, very cool. I met him. I can't believe now that I actually met Olivier Gendebien. I met him at Bernard Caillet's chalet in Olain-Villars, Villars-sur-Orlan, it's known as these days. Sounds a lot more posh, doesn't it? In, I don't know, when would that have been? It would have been about 80, around 80, 81, around there. And I used to go there for a week or so every winter. Bernard was a very good friend, another mentor of mine. What a wonderful guy. And I was close to Bernard because of the whole Frank Williams Saudi Arabian thing, because he actually had the contract with Saudi Arabian Airlines to do all the press releases as well. So I worked with him very closely on that. And anyway, we were doing it was a Saturday, I think. And it was a lovely atmosphere there by his chalet, which is right by the village, but the snow everywhere and the 2 black labs everywhere and running around barking. And he said, "Oh, I've got some friends coming over." And the friends were Olivier Gendebien, Steve Podborski, and Ken Reid. Steve and Ken, the 2 mega Canadian downhill racers, and Olivier Gendebien. And we had lunch together. It was incredible. Yeah, and I asked Olivier a lot of questions about Le Mans in those days. And a lot of the talk, obviously, when you look back at Le Mans, you're a driver like Olivier, a lot of it is about the rain or this happened or that happened. But there was a lot of Bernard Caillet in there saying, "Oh, yeah, I remember when..." It was just wonderful. A great guy. A big, and it's so easy to categorize drivers as good endurance, long distance drivers, not so good in Formula One. But I think Olivier could have held his own in a good Grand Prix team for as long as he needed to, really. And he did do a lot of good stuff in single seaters as well. So great driver. Thanks for the question. Wow, what a question. Mr. Ninja Fish, it's a shame the race will be a bit boring because they test at Barcelona. They shouldn't race at tracks they test at. Well, yeah, they don't actually test very much at Barcelona now because of the winter restrictions. They just test in Bahrain now and no mid-season testing. Having said that, there is going to be a Pirelli tyre test after the Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona. I think Red Bull and Racing Bulls are going to be there. Maybe Mercedes, I think. Just a tyre test. Pirelli do quite a lot of those, but they're not in relevant cars and they don't affect anything anyway. It's after the race, so it's meaningless in terms of helping them this weekend. So yeah, what you're saying used to be the case, but actually it's not the case anymore. It's kind of a shame, isn't it, that we don't have a lot of testing in Europe, because testing was always a great thing over the winter and in the midsummer, actually. It was a wonderful thing. And when there was no restriction on testing, you could, if you couldn't afford to go to the British Grand Prix, you go up to Silverstone for 4 days and just sit there and watch all the Grand Prix teams and get all the autographs you want. Doesn't happen anymore, of course, but that's how it used to be. And at the British Grand Prix, just before the Goodyear tyre test, they used to do this thing where they got about 10 different road cars, all on Goodyear tyres, and the Grand Prix drivers would drive selected VIPs and journalists around Silverstone. Today's version of the hot laps, but not produced over a Grand Prix weekend. It was just during testing when there was no spectator attendance, but we all had a ball, you know. I went around with a lot of Grand Prix drivers in those road cars in those days. They were really good, as you can imagine. And I've always felt wonderful about Goodyear ever since. JS, hi Peter, thanks for your insight. Have you ever watched Formula One broadcast qualifying ghost laps? Excellent comparison between short, long corners, particularly Max and Charles compared to both McLaren drivers. Well, that's interesting to hear. I'm pleased to hear they do that. I haven't actually watched it, no, but really, some people are starting to realise there is such a thing as a short corner. It wasn't that long ago somebody gave me a hard time saying, "What's Windsor on about short corners? It's all a load of rubbish." People are starting to think it's not a load of rubbish. Wow, it's amazing. They're thinking that some drivers are different from others. Astonishing. Of course they are, and of course they always have been. So, Forza Martina, Peter, stop disrespecting the 24 hours of Le Mans. I'm not disrespecting it. I'm just saying that it's a you know, well, I didn't disrespect at all. I said they probably have a big TV audience at the beginning and the end of the race and have a big crowd. So that's not disrespecting it. It's the opposite, actually. It's respecting it. Although, of course, Le Mans always has to be seen in the context of the 1962 race when, as a result of Jim Clark almost winning the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers in a Lotus 23, 1.6 litre twin cam, compared with the 4.5 litre Ferraris that he was blowing away in the semi-wet. The Le Mans organisers then refused to let Jim Clark, Lotus and the 23 start at Le Mans because they were worried it'd be too quick. So I always thought that was a bit, come on. And so did Jim Clark, because he never raced there again, even though he had a very good third place in a Aston DBR1 with Roy Salvadori. Aquila GP. They test at Bahrain. He's just replying to Mr. Ninja Fish. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that one, Aquila. Ashish Jain. Is there a driver preference for left-hand corners versus right? Or does it not matter at all? Well, it certainly matters to Charles Leclerc, because he said, just on Friday, he said, I've got understeer on left-handers, oversteer on right-handers. What's going on? Oh, it's impossible. This is the guy that finished second. I guess that was tyre temperatures or something. I don't know. Because what are there? More right-handers at Monaco than left. Most circuits, indeed. Preferences? Why is the 330 P4 right-hand drive, one of the great all-time sports racing cars? Why was it a right-hand drive 67 car? Because Mauro Folgheri also said, well, more right-handers than left-handers. They get all the weight on the right-hand side. So that's why. In terms of driver preferences, it's a good question. It's a bit like the question we had, and I must get one of my engineer buddies to answer this one. If you are a left footer, if you're left-footed in terms of kicking a football, would it give you any advantage in terms of feel when you're left foot braking? It's a good question. I have to confess, I've been lax in not following that one through. And I suppose this other one is a similar question, this one now about left and right-handers. The only thing I'd say is that I did mention at Imola, that very quick left-hander, turn 9, which I did quite a lot of detailed analysis of. You don't see many incidents there, in the same way that you do at, I don't know, Copse even, at Silverstone. Copse is probably quicker, but this was 5th to 6th gear, so it's a quick corner, that left-hander. You don't see, and I've often wondered in my mind whether that's because it's a left-hander and everybody's just a little bit more cautious because it's a left-hander. I don't know. There used to be a quick left-hander at the end of the straight in Rio, and there are always quite a lot of incidents there. No, actually, it wasn't that quick. It was kind of tight corner, so it's a different thing. Thinking about quick corners, left-handers, 130R. Well, it's just flat now, isn't it? Alan McNish will tell you that 130R, when it was a different radius, was pretty demanding as a left-hander. It's an interesting question. The way the body, the mind works, left to right-handers, the synchronization, coordination between left and right-handers as a human being as well. Mr. Ninja Fish, I'm aware they should restrict testing to tracks they won't race on in the near future. Well, he's saying don't test at Bahrain. Well, they won't race on. That's a good point, actually. That's maybe, they can't afford to have a French or German Grand Prix. They should allow testing at Ricard more. Everybody should test at Ricard, south of France. Mega. Yeah, why not? As we saw from that great onboard that I was talking about in the last live stream with Horatio Fitzsimon, Ricard's a pretty good circuit still. Be nice, wouldn't it? Then the French could all go to that. Wouldn't be the Grand Prix. We could try. We could do effectively what a lot of you are suggesting we should do at Monaco and just go to watch Ricard, not the French Grand Prix. Lots of Formula One cars though. Let's have a good time there. Parc Fermé, Greece. Why was Lewis Hamilton so slow? 50 seconds from the lead. Fanboys say it was the blue flags, but come on. Well, don't forget, he was given a 3-place grid penalty for a start. I mean, he was quite quick in qualifying. He was 3rd, wasn't he? So, given that, and given the impossibility of overtaking, his speed was entirely controlled by whoever was in front of him. And they were all going super slowly because they thought that was the way to win the race or do as well as they could. That's a ridiculous 2-stop strategy thing. So I think his race is a good example of how that whole rule was a joke. and I think he would have been. Hang on, let's think about the podium. Would he have, if off the line, he probably would have been ahead of Piastri? I don't know. Where did he quite? No, third or fourth. Fourth, I think he was. But he would have been top 4. I think he probably would have beaten Max, wouldn't he? Maybe not. Anyway, don't give Lewis too hard a time, because he did get that penalty, and it wasn't really his fault. He was told that Max was on a slow lap. No, he was told initially he was on a push lap. Then he was told he was on a slow lap. So he didn't stop and slow the car right down to let Max get through Massenet. He just sort of kept going. And when Max got to the apex of Massenet, there was Lewis. And he got the 3-place grid penalty as a result. Not very good. Tisno, thoughts on the TD, Peter? TD means technical director. On which team? Ferrari, are you talking about? Well, it's not Adrian Newey, is all I can tell you. Alpha 007. On Thursday, all drivers had a private screening of the new Formula One movie. Max was absent. iRacing public lobbies. Disrespectful or the best mindset? Lance wasn't there too, but who cares? I think that was absolutely the right thing to do, because I can't imagine it's any good, is it? Am I allowed to say that? Yeah, of course I am. I haven't. The more they say, oh, it's great, the more I think we should say it's probably not going to be very good at all. So I think Max did the right thing. I'm being obviously super cynical here. Just trying to think of it from Max's point of view. I think the last thing you want to have over a Grand Prix weekend is somebody else's idea of what Formula One is all about, or events that you know something about. It's the last thing you need. What you want is your own life, simplified, distilled down to how you're running it that weekend to win the Monaco Grand Prix, your friends, your family, your people around you. You don't want any of that other stuff, any more than if Max is watching replays on TV, he probably has the volume muted, I would have thought. Why would he want to hear the commentators rabbiting on? So it's just an extension of that. I think he's absolutely right. Totally wrong time to do it. And it should have been, well, they don't even need to do it anyway. So I think he did the right thing. I totally agree with him. It's the right attitude. And the reason I'm waffling at the moment is because the chat box has just jumped a million questions. And as I'm skimming back, I've come across a super chat from Debbie Maffio. Oscar's the man from Australia. 3 Aussie flags. Well, he is. Yeah, I mean, 3rd place at Monaco. Don't underestimate the importance of that for Oscar. That was Oscar not on his great weekend, still finishing 3rd. Not bad, eh? So thank you, Debbie, for that. Now going back. So continuing to the whole Lewis theme. From Samai. Hi, Peter. Do you think Ferrari need a new race engineer for Lewis, given the constant miscommunication? Will that make a difference? I would be interested to see if Jock was put on that car, how it would go, to be honest. Because, I mean, Jock always got the best from drivers like Taku, Sato. You know, he was really good with Sato, really good with Villeneuve. Just a good guy. You know, he understands how to drive a Grand Prix car too. So if I was Freddie Vasseur, which I'm not, obviously, I would put Jock into a more central role there. The problem with that, of course, is that Charles had several good years with Jock, and I'm not sure it would work from a team harmony point of view, because I'm sure Jock's still got a lot he can do with Charles as well. So I don't know. I really don't know what they'll do. There are plenty of, I mean, being a good race engineer, I mean, I think Tom Stallard's a very good race engineer. There are plenty of others. I hate to pinpoint one, but I think he's a great guy for Piastri because he's got this rowing Olympic background and therefore can look beyond Formula One as an athlete and can keep things in perspective and proportion. And I think, to be honest, I think Jock's got a bit of that as well. But I think Tom does a very good job with Oscar, and he'll be very good at keeping Oscar on the straight and narrow going to the Spanish Grand Prix now. Apex Twin. How about they're only allowed to use the softs at Monaco for the entire weekend? Well, I need to hand over to Mario Isla at Pirelli as an answer to that one. I don't know what that would mean in terms of production and everything else. I mean, you could say, why not Why not just say to them, keep the current tires they got, but you can't make any, you're not allowed to make any pit stops. Go the other way, see what happens then. But it wouldn't help because they'd all drive around at 3 miles an hour, wouldn't they? So that wouldn't help either. I think the speed they were going was one of the problems. Normally you can't really notice the difference. A circuit like, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, you can't really tell the difference between somebody doing 310 kilometers an hour on the straight on their own with no graphics compared with 340 kilometers an hour. It's difficult to tell. But at Monaco, it was pretty obvious that they were miles away from the limit in those early laps, particularly with Ollie Behrman, another of the Ferrari Academy drivers, don't forget, who's doing really well. Ollie Behrman coming in early, and then he's on a free road, and he's going 2 seconds quicker than the race leader. That doesn't happen very often, does it? That early in the race on full tanks. And so it went on. And then you got Isaac Hadjar doing 19s mid-race because he's got to get to the end. 4 seconds off the pace. Home email, Auto Doctor. No need to impose a number of times through the alternative loop. Just make the alternative very slightly not preferred so that the faster car has to do some work to make it pass. Oh, I see what you mean. You've got like a passing loop. You can only use three times in the race or something. No, I don't think that would work. It's a nice idea. It's thinking laterally. I was 100% behind people that think laterally. But I just know that would never happen because, well, apart from anything else, how would you do the race distance? Because it would be two slightly different corners in length, wouldn't it? That's why they didn't do the chicane at Indianapolis in 2005, because it was it would have been for Saturday and Sunday, and everybody, well, this is the Bernie argument, you know, all the Bridgestone runners on Friday who'd run without the chicane had done a lap time that wouldn't be relevant to the new circuit or some rubbish. I don't know what it was. I mean, if I think about it now, Bernie and Max not allowing a chicane at Indy in 2005 in order to have a motor race because the Michelins wouldn't last on the banking is absolutely ridiculous. Why didn't they do that? They're in America in the showpiece race of the United States for Formula One, and they allowed 5 cars to start the race as a result. When you think that in 1969 they practiced on Thursday at Monaco with high wings on the cars and then decided to ban them overnight, and they had to practice Saturday and race Sunday with no wings on the cars, and everybody just did it. And I was asking Jackie Stewart about it recently, and he said, oh, it wouldn't really come into it, really. Yeah, just did it. You know, that was a much bigger thing than just putting a chicane up to stop tyre failures. Yet they wouldn't do it because they wanted to hang Michelin out to dry, which is why we don't have Michelin in Formula One now. Good job. Hackmaster69, why do you not like Fernando Alonso's driving style? Where does he lose time, or what could he do better? And then why is he so good despite this? Well, I do like his style. I think he's wonderful. He's not a classic early turn-in driver like Max or Charles or Jim Clark or Nigel Mansell or Alan Prost. But like Ayrton Senna, who was not an early turn-in driver either, he has a lot of other qualities in other areas. The only and what he has is unbelievably good footwork, sensitive footwork, and he can get himself out of virtually any potential scrape just with his footwork. He's amazing how he steers the car with his feet. And I saw that firsthand doing a lap of Ricard with him in some sort of hot Renault a few years ago. And you can see it on the track. He's just incredible. He always has the car, all 4 tires seem to be planted correctly at any given moment. My only misgiving, not misgiving, but it's a bit like the Ayrton Senna throttle blipping thing, which he had long before Formula One. He had that in the Formula 3 days. My only misgiving about Fernando is his initial turn-in. And if you look at, say, Alex Albon, good example. Alex Albon's pretty seamless from the car traveling in a straight line to beginning its lateral load, the initial steering movement, as is Max. But Fernando has this characteristic, I wouldn't say habit, because that would imply it's wrong. It's a characteristic of that. And that's just like, he has to jink the car to get on top of it. And when he's on top of it, it's just sublime pedal and to some extent hand management, mainly foot management. And he's just brilliant like that. But he's the only guy I've ever seen who has that boom like that. to the point where I remember Rob Wilson saying once, when he was working on the vest that he was, in which he could simulate different driving styles, that he could easily simulate a Fernando Alonso driving style in terms of vibrations and stuff you would feel if you didn't have the right initial steering input that Fernando has. It's not something you'd ever want to recommend to a young driver, to copy that, because it's unique to Fernando. And that's what makes him great. I mean, I did praise him massively, I think, when he did that time in Q2 on medium tyres. Just phenomenal in the Aston Martin. And if anything said, Adrian, I should be in your car in 26, it was that. And I'm sure Adrian will have left Monaco mainly with that in his mind. I would be surprised if he didn't. But steering input, yeah, it's caused him a few issues over the years, but it's also part of what Fernando's all about. He's brilliant like that. Sorry, at Apex, I like it. No, Sema Dragon says to at Apex, twin, I like it. Okay. Geo Mission, hello Peter. As an American, I knew Nigel Mansell as an IndyCar driver. What did you think of his time in America? Well, yeah, I was with him in '93 most of that year. I left Williams when he did, actually. And no, not at the same time, but I left at the end of '93. 92 rather. 93, yeah. I spent most of the time with unbelievably sweaty palms watching Nigel around ovals with concrete walls on the outside, knowing Nigel as well as I did, knowing that he would never, ever drive the car other than 100% all the time. I was always fearful. And then he had that massive shunt at Phoenix and he hurt his back. Just by really going a bit too quickly too soon, I think, before he'd really got the feel of how to drive on an oval. But it's almost like with Nigel, you know, he's got to get through that. And then after that, wow. I think, you know, his qualifying lap at Indy, he qualified third, I think, from memory. I think Lyndike was on the pole that year. But it was an amazing lap. I remember him coming through 4, and the car did one of those in the middle of 4, and he just came out. I don't know how close. They did all that Monaco stuff, you know, close to the wall. Nigel would have been an inch, 2 inches from the wall on his best qualifying lap at Indy in '93. It's a good car, that Newman Haas car, but Nigel, he's such a soft touch as a racing driver in terms of his inputs, steering and throttle and brakes. And he was able to use short corners quite a lot in that car as well. Stop longer braking areas because of the cast iron brakes and everything, but he was still able to magnify that. And yeah, he was just fabulous to watch. I mean, the whole thing was annoying in a way, because I'm absolutely convinced he would have won the World Championship in '93 had he stayed at Williams. He would have beaten Prost. But there he was in America, and he did win the IndyCar World Championship, didn't he? So that's back to Formula One, and that's quite an achievement. I don't think anybody's ever done that. Probably never will. So yeah, interesting that you saw him in America, but seeing him on an oval was mind-blowingly good. He was incredibly good. Some more super chats here. Bad Boy says, thanks, Peter. Thank you very much, Bad Boy. Aditya Srivanasan, Mint 29. Thank you very much for that as well. Very kind. Peter, you're the man. Thank you. Yeah, we've had that one, so I'm saying it twice. So let's go back to the top of the box. Wow, a lot of questions coming in now. A lot. Tightly, another super chat says, just want to say thank you for all your chats. Love it. Thank you very much. It's very kind. Thank you. Right. So let's go back to the top. Hopefully this whole chat box thing won't explode as it normally does. I've got one slight improvement to the brake ducting on my laptop, where I've actually got twin fans underneath now, a bit like the Gordon Murray Brabham in '78. None of which is legal, of course. Okay, Louis Essie. Thoughts on Max being the next person to win the Triple Crown? Graham Hill is the only person who achieved it. Max loves his Le Mans, would probably dominate Indy if he gave it a shot. Yeah, I mean, Max is Max, and I can't imagine him, if he did Indy, he would only do it with, you know, Ganassi or Penske or Andretti, one of the top teams. And if he's in a very good car, very good team, of course, Max Verstappen can win a lot of IndyCar races and the Indy 500. No doubt about that at all. And same goes to Le Mans. So my thoughts are, if he wanted, whatever he wanted to do, and I'd even go so far as to say if he wanted to do WRC, I think he could probably win a WRC round if he put his mind to it and spent enough correct amount of time. And congratulations to his dad, Joss, who finished top 10, finished 8th, I think, in the recent ERC round in Hungary. Incredible, really. When you think Jos Verstappen at his age, his Formula One background, now doing really well in the European Rally Championship, Skoda, very good. So you can imagine Max, oh, come on, Dad, let me have a run. Yeah, okay. Don't let anybody see this. Going up into the Ardennes forest or wherever he goes and giving that Rally 2 Skoda a bit of a thrash. Why wouldn't he? Good on your Joss. Very good. Auto Doctor, very rude here. You think Max would stoop so low as to race Indy? What's that mean? Friction Circle Auto Doctor says, the bigger, heavier is actually more dangerous given the inertia. Stationary car piled into by 585 kilograms versus 800 kilograms. I know which I'd rather be in. Yeah, but I don't think Max would make his decision to do IndyCar based on weight and how safe they were or not. He'd do it on how nice the car is to drive at very high speed and whether he can win. Isn't that what it's all about? It's just about Lance Stroll, I think. Didn't he? He was asked once what Formula One car he'd most like to drive from another era, and I think he said something like anything with a seatbelt or something like that. You know, most Grand Prix drivers, Fernando, Max, those guys, just think about race cars, don't they? Of course they want to be safe, and of course they don't want to get hurt, but at the same time, that's not what forms their decision-making process. Mr. Ninja Fish, the traditional Triple Crown isn't really significant enough. It needs to be a Grand Slam and include more events. Well, in all this Triple Crown business, as you say, Graham Hill, the only driver to have won the Formula One World Championship, the Indianapolis 500 and the Le Mans 24 Hours. No other driver has done that. But even that is slightly spurious because, as we now know, Jim Clark won the 66 Indy 500. He says with a smile, of course, if Jimmy was with me today, he'd say, no, it was Graham Hill, But we all know that the USAC stewards got it wrong, the lap scorers. It was all done by hand in those days. They got it wrong. Jimmy didn't lose a lap. He won that race. So anyway, putting that to one side, there's a Triple Crown, but even bigger than the Triple Crown, which nobody seems to be mentioning, is what Jim Clark did in 1965 when he won the Formula One World Championship and the Indy 500 in the same year. End of story. Forget your Triple Crown stuff. I want to see somebody do that. I want to see Max Verstappen do that. I want to see him win the Formula One World Championship and the Indy 500 in the same year. Then we can say, that is an achievement. I'm saying that slightly, obviously, tongue-in-cheek, because I know he'll never do it. He won't be allowed to do it, more to the point. And so it'll never happen. And I'm kind of saying it also because 1965, 2025, bit of an anniversary of what Jim Clark did that year. And I don't think we should ever understate what he achieved and how he did that and how big a achievement that was. You can imagine the conversation in February 1965 in the local cafe in wherever it was, in North London, Lotus factory. So, Colin, are you buying or am I buying? No, Jimmy, it's your turn. You didn't pay the expenses at that last race in Mexico, so you can pay for it now. Okay, all right. What are you going to have? Piece of toast. Okay, good. Coffee, tea. So what is it you want to see me about, Colin? Well, we were thinking that we might do Indy this year again. Obviously, we got them forward, we want to do it, and I think we got a very good chance of winning, Jimmy. But to do it, really, practically, it means missing the Monaco Grand Prix to do it. And we still want to win the World Championship. Do you think that's doable? Are you prepared to do that? Well, I mean, past years, Colin, we've done both. You know, I've qualified, then I've flown back, done Monaco, and then flown back and done Indy. Can't we do that again? No. If we want to win Indy, we've got to focus on it, Jimmy. It's how we're going to have to do it. Okay, it's a big ask, but I'll see if I can do it. I'll see if I can win the championship and Indy. And they went away, and he did it. You know, that's how it would have been. And when you think of what he achieved, just astonishing. Don't forget, Indy was the whole month of May then as well. It wasn't just, you know, qualifying one weekend and then 2 days of racing the following weekend. It was the whole month of May. So he had to switch off from Formula One and focus 100% on Indy. All those different days of practicing and testing and the wind direction, this and that. And he did it all. Bucky Nick, Thought the qualifying was great and Lando immaculate. Then fastest lap and the win was crazy strategies. Yeah, fastest lap right at the end. I think it was just to show how much he'd been held up by young Charles Leclerc. Sorry, by young Max Verstappen. Not Charles Leclerc. Max Verstappen, who was taking all the clean air from Lando, and Lando was having to hang back sort of enough just to not to damage the tyres, even though they're going super slowly. But the minute Max went in on that final lap, Lando just went, you know, purple sector 1, whatever. It was inevitable he was going to set fastest lap, even without trying. You know, it was 2 seconds a lap quicker or something, wasn't it? Nick Swanson, do we know why Charles and Lewis were wearing different coloured race suits, white and red respectively? White and red, colours of Monte Carlo, national flag. Was it that? I don't know. I've no idea. I didn't even notice it, actually. Shows how much I pay attention to that sort of thing. Well, I do pay attention to it, but I hadn't noticed they were in different suits. I just assumed the white was for Miami and they were all back in red. But of course, Charles was in white, wasn't he? Yeah. Something to do with Monaco and Charles liking the white for good luck or whatever. Yeah, well, it didn't work. Well, he had a good weekend, Charles. It's, you know, P2 in Monaco, not bad in that car where he's been this year. And not the same as 2024, I agree, but put up a good fight, didn't he? Westerly Storm 99. When Lewis asked if he was still 1 minute behind and was in 5th with Max backing up the field. Yeah. Luke Mifsud. Hi, Peter. Great content as usual. I think Ferrari has a hierarchy where the engineers are not allowed to make decisions on the fly. That's why all the confusion with Hamilton. What's your opinion? Well, that's what it looks like. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, Freddie Vasseur did say when they decided not to get Adrian, he said something along the lines of, and I will be playing an interim role in engineering management or something like that. I don't want to, you know, misquote him. And so I wonder whether you're right. You know, I wonder whether they can't really say anything significant to the drivers without consulting Freddie first, which seems a bit cumbersome, doesn't it? If you don't trust your engineers to run the whole thing as it should be run off the bat, then you shouldn't hire them in the first place. So, yeah, you could well be right. I wish I knew, really. But if we had proper television of the type I've been describing, we'd know the answers to all these questions. You wouldn't have to ask me. Yeah, and here's another one agreeing with the TV that I've been talking about. Benzi's News Showdown. We've had you before, Benzi's. Thank you very much, mate. I'd love to hear the chatter after Oscar's terrible 3.8 pit stop. Yeah, exactly. And then Oscar's lovely phrase, well, that didn't work, or something like that, wasn't it? He's so good on understatement now. Very Frank Gardner, very, very Jack Brabham. Except that we didn't have radios then. I wish we did. It would have been great to have listened to Black Jack and Frank Gardner on the radio. Yeah, well, what's this cove think he's doing here? Yeah, take that, Sterling. Yeah, that'll sort you out. Auto Doctor. I don't think weight of the cars matters one bit for how the cars are able to make for great racing. Size is an issue at some courses. Maybe a narrower track at some courses might help. But can't have... now I've got to go all the way back up again. Because it's overloaded with chat. I know that's what's going on now. But can't have different specs for wheelbase just for those races. No, you can't. They're trying to cut costs in Formula One in terms of car development and testing and design and construction. So to say, well, you're allowed to build a car with 0.5 metre shorter wheelbase for Monaco and 0.5 metre narrower, yeah, it's new cars, isn't it? That ain't going to happen. The engine, the power unit, the whole thing, none of it would work. So you can't do any of that, sadly. Even though some teams, most teams, I think, actually had different front suspension components, not just geometry, components, in order to have enough steering lock to get through the station hairpin. Friction Circular says, Oscar's far cleaner than Jack Brabham. Tilly grows and Max like ego anyway. I think you're mixing two things out. You're talking about ego and then cleanliness of style. I think you're right. Although there are a few Jack Brabham-ish opposite lock slides at Monaco, weren't there? We saw last weekend from Oscar. But don't forget, Jack drove completely different Grand Prix cars. He drove cars with, for the most part, yeah, with treaded tyres. I don't think he ever drove on slicks, did he? 70, I think it was still treaded tyres. And so, yeah, Jack was always sideways everywhere. He was a speedway driver, wasn't he? Yeah, it's the way to drive the car, mate. Yeah, sideways. And, you know, if you clout Sterling Moss's Cooper following you closely at Zandvoort with a brick from the apex you've just picked up from the apex, so much the better. So Oscar, yeah, Oscar was, I think if Black Jack was 25 years old now and drove Oscar's McLaren, he'd probably drive it about the same way as Oscar, actually, I'd like to think. Yunus Ibrahim, who's best between Leclerc, Norris and Piastri? I would say Leclerc out of those three. I think Leclerc is, yeah, I think he's a class act. And I think Norris and Piastri are pretty classy. I don't think they define classiness as a style of driving. I think they're just almost there, but not quite. It's a difference between Jack Brabham and Jim Clark, really. Pretty good. Yeah, I mean, very, very good, but not quite Jimmy. I think I said what it was. Auto Doctor. Touring cars are heavy, but the racing is fantastic. Yeah, well, it's annoying to have you say that because it means I'm going to have to heap praise on my mate Alan Gow for running the British Touring Car Championship the way he does. When he broke all the rules, he didn't have a huge deal with a commercial rights holder. He decided to... and he decided to put it all on live network television without having to take a huge amount of money from, you know, one of the Skies or whatever. And as a result of that, they got massive TV exposure, which means the teams then can go and get proper sponsorship, and the whole championship then generates enormous crowds. And he then rigs the cars so that they're all very close and they have 6 different winners in 6 different races and stuff. So, yeah, it's a good point, actually. You know, if you want that, go and watch the British Touring Car Championship. Leave Formula One alone. You know, Formula One is what it is. It's never going to be the BTCC because it isn't. Another super chat here from Bad Boy again. Do you think that the wing specifications might change the outcome of the Spanish Grand Prix? No. I think it might make it a bit closer. And I think, as I say, I think you might see Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull a little bit more consistently nearer McLaren than they have been. But I don't think it will change the order necessarily. Give or take a variable or two, which might let in a Max or a Charles, maybe a Lewis, for sure a George. But McLaren will still have a very, very good car around Barcelona. I'm convinced of that. Hope I'm wrong in a way, because it'd be great to see the whole championship suddenly become wide open. But on the other hand, McLaren have earned the position they're in, and it's kind of, if you're at McLaren, it'd be kind of annoying if this is a really significant change, which some people are saying it should be. Then it's kind of annoying to have to do that at short notice in the middle of the year. But it's not the first time that's happened in Formula One, that's for sure. What about Williams going from Michelin to Goodyear halfway through the season? That sort of thing doesn't happen anymore these days, does it? Benzi's News Showdown again. Yeah, hello, mate. Friction Circular. Oh, he's replying to Friction Circular now. That was the Race of Champions, ROC, and identical cars, current and Formula One. Oh, yeah, it's a good point. Race of Champions. Could that work around Monaco? Well, you might as well go back to the original thing then of 250 gearbox karts developed by the teams. Be quite fun, wouldn't it? And watching all these guys in karts around Monaco. Maybe that you would have some overtaking then, for sure. I'm not sure you'd have overtaking in some sort of ROC thing with touring cars because they're quite big, aren't they? Huge, in fact. In fact, the last ROC Race of Champions was Camaros, I think, which there's no way you'd be able to pass with Camaros around Monaco. If they're all on Monacos. So let's have another. Good viewing on YouTube if you can find it. I think a bicycle race would be more entertaining than next Monaco. Leclerc's already in training by looks. Yeah, bicycles. Yeah, I suppose so. Although so many bikes, kind of difficult. I mean, I don't understand why the Tour de France. I totally get the Tour de France as an athletic event. It's a wonderful thing. It's television. My mum used to watch it because she loved seeing all the mountains and the lakes and everything. But actually watching the bikes on TV for all that time, the number of bikes, is kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? Benzi's News Showdown. Imagine all of the current Formula One drivers in super fast, small electric cars on Sunday. Well, of course, this goes back to my other point, which is that Formula E should always have been a part of the Formula One package, like Formula 2 and Formula 3. Formula One could then have addressed the whole electric generation without affecting too much what they were doing with the Formula One cars, which are supposed to be for the show and entertainment, then we would not have needed to have gone to hybrid engines. We could have kept the V10s or the V8s. We could have had fuel-burning Formula One cars. We could have had energy-saving electric cars on the thing, driven by the Grand Prix drivers, Formula 2 and Formula 3. That never happened because of the fight between John Todd and Bernie Ecclestone. Thank you very much, guys. So Todd then went off and did Formula E on his own, with his own thing, with, you know, sold at commercial rights. And that's why Formula One's always been in a bit of a mess ever since, trying to have hybrids and all these manufacturers at the same time. It wants close racing, lots of overtaking. It's all too much going on. That's one of the reasons we're in that situation. If Bernie and Todd had acted logically, as you and I would have, we would be able to say, right, for Monaco, actually, we're not going to use the current Grand Prix cars. We're going to use the electric cars that you all know and love, because Max often drives the Red Bull electric car at other Grand Prix, does 10 races a year, and they're all going to be in these electric cars for the Monaco Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton. And that would be not a bad thing if it was properly promoted. But that went long ago with the way Bernie and Max fell out over the Bahrain Civil War. Eunice Ibrahim, bring back refueling. Have a few fires in the pit lane to add to the attraction. Yeah, maybe. Oh, I'm going to have to sneeze in a minute, I think. What time is it? 20 to 2. What time did I start? 11:30, 12:30, 1:30. I've been going over 2 hours, guys. A couple more questions. Another super chat. Where are we? Bring back refueling. What was that one? Okay. Westerly Storm. Why did Lewis not catch Oscar when Max was backing up the field, given that Max still had a pit stop to do? I think he just felt he was so far off the pace, did he not? That he was just driving around to see if there was a safety car or something, I guess. Isn't that what they were all doing then, that stage of the race? I don't think he was ever going to catch them, given the amount of time he had lost early in the race. So I think it was that. It was that whole, wait for a safety car. Of course, safety car was never going to happen because they were all going so slowly anyway. Again, I don't know. I have to say, I'm not very good at answering that question for one reason. I'm thinking, why don't I really know the answer? It's because I actually switched off. I thought the whole thing was so boring. I was watching it, but I was actually reading a 1975 edition of Autocar whilst I was. The John Miles track test of the Arbath Fiat 131 Rally Special, which is a really good article by John Miles. Actually much more interesting than the Grand Prix itself at that point. Friction Circler. Monaco's good for the grid walk and perfect 10 women and the cameraman inadvertently following during Martin's grid walk. Yeah, I don't know. Is it? Yeah, all those people trying to hang on, be in the background, waving. It's a bit pathetic, isn't it? I did quite a lot of those grid walks for speed live. The worst one was when I had to interview that ridiculous cook, chef, I guess he's called. I think he's still associated with Formula One. And we were on live on American TV, and all he did, he used the F word about 15 times in 3 seconds, and I just cut him off and walked away. Absolutely ridiculous. People should behave, I think, if they're going to be on that grid. Imola was better than Monaco. Well, of course it was. A much better race. Even though there was not much overtaking there, it was a much better race. Proper circuit. Well, I shouldn't say proper circuit. Had some good corners. But Monaco is what it is. It isn't Imola, because it's got all that history and it's in a town. And I keep saying, if you wanted somebody who knew absolutely nothing about Formula One and all they ever did was watch football on TV or something, and they said, okay, tell me why you like Formula One. What's this all about? I would take them to Friday practice at Monaco and stand them on the outside of Tabac and say, that's what Formula One is. And they go, whoa. Takes me back actually to, I was flag marshalling on Saturday morning it's a race day. Actually, it's race day, 69 Warwick Farm International in the rain. Jochen Rindt, Chris Amon, Piers Courage, and Graham Hill. And I remember Jochen was coming. I was flag marshalling with another friend of mine, David Steindl, and Jochen was coming through Paddock Bend, our corner. We were on the outside of it, quite a long way away, luckily. And Jochen was just absolutely sideways in the Lotus 49B. Absolutely brilliant. And I remember David turned around to me and he said, anybody that thinks cricket or football or surfing is any good should be here right now on this flag point watching Jock and Rindt. I always remember that. I thought, yeah, he's absolutely right. Auto Doctor 911. If additional track can't be made available for alternative loop, maybe split the current track in two with a figure eight style crossover. Steady on, steady on. This is Monaco we're talking about. I know that, you know, they all like to make as much money as they can out of property development at Monaco, but I mean, that's going a bit over the top, isn't it? Build a figure eight flyover at Monaco. I think Gilles de Pasteur will be rubbing his hands together. See, he seems to build everything that's happening in Monaco these days, as well as vehicles that are going to land on Mars and the moon. Good luck to him, but, you know, I don't think we need that for Monaco. Myself. Anyway, lots of questions. Everybody's talking amongst themselves. Connor thinks a top 10 shootout, Bathurst 1000 style, would work perfectly for Q3 at Monaco. Well, we used to have all those top 10 things at Monaco, in Formula One, didn't we? And the last person out was when the track was quickest. So you wanted to be last out. And usually that was whoever was, let me get it right, slowest, I think, in Q2, because they reversed it. So everyone was trying to go as slow as possible in Q2. Ridiculous. Yeah, again, you know, the race at Monaco is about the start, and it's, if you like, it's about the start into Saint-Devote, and then it's about the finish, the checkered flag, the royal box, the anthem, the police. That, you know, this barest element, that's what Monaco's all about. Okay, a bit of the pre-race palaver as well. So at least it's got all that. I'm just saying embellish it all with lots more interaction with the real Formula One people there who make a difference to it all. Another super chat. Stephen Gomez says, I'm new to Formula One, of fans attracted by drive. I watch everything, practicing, qualifying and the race. Is there an F1 documentary you would recommend for me to learn about the history of this amazing sport? Stephen, I can only recommend that you go to the Formula One exhibition, which is moving all over the world. You'll see upcoming events and where it currently is located as well. Because in that's exactly what we've done. We've tried to tell the story of Formula One over the years and how we got to where we are today and where today might well affect where we're going tomorrow. So that's what I would say. It's a little bit of a cop-out. Sorry, I didn't put your question up on the screen there. There we go. There we go. So do that. Short of that, documentary. Shell History of Motorsport is very good for the 1930s. And the problem is post-81, all the footage, actually it's about post-72 now. Now they brought all the Brunswick Marlborough footage. Formula One own all the rights to that. So it's incredibly expensive for anybody to make any meaningful documentary, anything post-early 70s now. So there's very little of it out there in terms of a real documentary. There is stuff out there, obviously, but not as much as there should be. So I'd recommend the Formula One exhibition before I recommend anything else. Debbie has no confidence in Lando. She says, Lando will wreck the next races, my opinion. Poor Lando. Oh, well, I hope he's not watching this one then. Lonely bits. But the positions are staggered. What about other positions? I think you're talking about my idea of the pole man being allowed to choose which side of the grid he wants to start. I mean, at the moment, the pole defines where P3 is or where P5 is or where P4 is, obviously because it's staggered. And so it makes no difference. If he chose to be on the left, then it would be staggered the other way. The only objection I've ever heard to that is saying, well, we don't actually have both sides of the front row rigged up with sensors. So it would be a big job to have to suddenly change it. Well, sorry, what you do is just change it on every side. Why wouldn't you do that when we know? It's not that difficult to do. It's 2025. You know, it's a tiny thing in terms of the overall picture and how much you can improve things. So, yeah. Where are we? In order to see this, I need to get rid of that. Give all the drivers a Formula 3 car to race at Monaco. Well, depends what you mean by Formula 3 car, of course. I was thinking about this. It shouldn't be a current Grand Prix Formula 3 car because they wouldn't be able to overtake in those either. They're too big, too heavy. It would need to be a proper Formula 3 car, by which I mean a Euro Formula 3 car, or regional, I think they're called now, which is the really nice, super slippery Dallara Lite, the kind of F3 car that Lando Norris used to drive. That's what it needs to be. And yes, you'd get everybody loving those around Monaco. That's the perfect race car for Monaco in terms of power, pace, size, weight, everything. Brilliant cars. And Dallara, I'm sure, could build a whole batch of those and give them to all the teams, and the teams could do their own development on them. And we could have those as the Monaco special cars. It'd be a wonderful thing. But it won't happen. I would love to see that. That would be even better than my TV idea. But it needs to be those Formula 3 cars. Forget about the current things. They're much too big. Friction Circular to CAC Master 69. Leclerc is a bit of a multi-talented freak. He composes classical music and plays the piano at top level, question mark. I think he is pretty good. I'm not sure he's in the Elio De Angelis, Francois Sever category, but he is pretty good. Elio De Angelis and Francois, two of the nicest guys I ever knew in Formula One. Both of them stellar drivers as well. So, a couple more questions, as I say. Let's have a look. Ninja Fish, in theory, you could adapt an F1 car to run at Indy. So if you could do it for Monaco or other tight street circuits, it's feasible. Well, Jim Clark did run the Formula One Lotus. He did the 62 US Grand Prix. Then they took the Formula One car to Indy and ran it around Indy to see how we get on. And it was so quick, they thought, right, we're going to do an Indy version of this car. Connor says the FIA was not trying to create more overtakes with the two-stop change. They were simply trying to create more variables throughout the race. Why? What did that achieve? All it achieved was everybody going slower, actually. And it was meaningless, as predicted. But it was all under the heading of Monaco's boring because there's no overtaking. So even though somebody from the FIA could put their hand up and say, oh, and we never intended to have more overtaking, the reality is they made a change based on the understanding that Monaco is boring because there's no overtaking. So it's almost semantics there, I'm afraid. So another freeze. So many questions. I feel, again, I have to express my apologies to those I'm not going to get to, because there are so many questions and I just can't get to them all. I've got to go out fairly soon. It's already been 2.5 hours. Give or take the 10 minutes or so when you didn't have any audio from me, but when you could read the text anyway. So did it really matter? Lewis Hamilton saying, "Are you upset with me or something?" would sound funny to a British observer. But that isn't the way to talk to an Italian engineer. Well, if Lewis wanted to express his irritation in a relatively calm way, isn't that a good way of doing it? I thought that was quite a good thing for Lewis to say. And even if the engineer, because the engineer can then take the option of saying, I don't understand the English inflection there, but I'm not upset with him, so I'll tell him I'm not, which is a good thing. Equally, he may think Lewis is upset, which is a good thing as well, because Lewis had a right to be upset, I think. Push to pass, this is from Auto Doctor. Push to pass might do more for overtaking than a reduction in wheelbase. Oof. Push to pass, another artificial gimmick. I'm kind of allergic to those, I'm afraid. You may be right. I just don't get it. I don't like gimmicks. I don't like artificial things. I like things to be natural. Yep, just having to scroll to the top again. This thing keeps freezing, overload. Ninja Fish says he wasn't prepared for Ferrari, but Bono must have had to stay because of George. No, Bono I think had to stay because of a non-complete clause that all these engineers now sign. Friction Circular, Peter, Montoya, I'm going to make this the last one. My voice is going as well. Montoya couldn't be made to train, but did Kimi basically shirk his press conference commitments as a modus operandi? And if so, how would that have worked under Ron Dennis? I think Ron was pretty fried with both of them, actually. Montoya was pretty undisciplined in a Ron Dennis view of the world. And by the way, congratulations to Juan Pablo and Sebastian on their P3 in the sprint race at Monaco. It was a bit of a lucky P3, bearing in mind he was in the pit lane when the race started, and then there was a multi-car shunt, and then this wasn't the sprint race, this was the feature race. What am I talking about? Sorry. And then he magically, when they restarted it, he was P2 on the grid. I'm not sure how that worked out. He obviously just accelerated out as the field was going past him. Then the accident was happening, and he just drove down the side and up the hill and P2. That's one way to do it. I've often said, the best place to start Monaco is the pit lane. Other circuits too. If you're a quick driver and you got, some sort of championship opportunity, whatever, and you have some issue in qualifying, and it means you're going to be down midfield, it's probably better often to be in the pit lane, to be away from all the first corner skirmishes at any given circuit, especially Monaco. Anyway, P2, and then he was P4, and then he got relegated back. Then he got pushed back to P3 when who was it? Arvid got a penalty for speeding in the pit lane, so he was P3. Anyway, congratulations to the Montoya family for P3 in the feature race Formula 2. A lot of hard work gone into that. Anyway, going back to Montoya, and what did he do? He broke his wrist or something, riding a bike or motocrossing, and told Ron that he was playing tennis or something. That wasn't very good. And then Kimi, though. Kimi was just his own guy. He didn't want any of that McLaren stuff either. That's probably why he said, I hate Formula One. And there's the famous story. Well, it's famous. It is the story of Kimi at Ron's wife's birthday tennis match, celebrity tennis match in the south of France, involving somebody like Borg and somebody else invited round playing tennis. And Kimi deciding, I think after a couple of drinks, deciding to be ball boy, and running to pick up the ball whenever it was, not in play. But instead of then throwing it to the server, would throw it out the court over the fence. It was funny about the first time it happened, but I think the 27th time it happened, when they ran out of balls, it was kind of a pain. So there you go. That's why Kimi left McLaren. I'm exaggerating a little bit, of course. But anyway, that's what these shows are all about. They're having a bit of a laugh. It's true. It's true story-ish. So, this whole business of Hamilton, English, Italian, this has never been an issue before. Most drivers are used to Italian journalists asking questions. But Nigel, what happened with the front of the bonnet of the car? Nigel knows what he's talking about. You don't need to worry about whether Ricciardo understands Lewis or Lewis understands Ricciardo. I don't think there's any problem there. And it's more a wavelength thing, I think, isn't it? They seem to be on different wavelengths all day. So what's this one? Auto Doctor. I keep saying last question, but the next question always looks quite interesting. So I'll keep going back to it, see what happens there. Yes, Dexter. All right, I know. Hamilton, this is from Auto Doctor. Hamilton deserves to at least have an Italian engineer with a small sense of humour and some better communication skills and perceptions overall. Yeah, well, I think Jock does speak Italian, and he's certainly got a sense of humour, that's for sure. I'm not saying he's the right guy, but I'm sure Jock would know. Well, let's stop talking about Jock because it's too political, and I don't want to sound as if he needs an English engineer there. I'm sure there are plenty of good Italian engineers. I'm sure Ricciardo is a very, very good race engineer. I don't in any way want to be too critical of anybody because I don't really know him. Well, I don't know him at all. But I can't imagine he's not a good engineer. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in that job, would he? So, Jason Navier, we'll make this the last question. We often hear about brake sensitivity across cars and manufacturers. What about acceleration? Does that differ? How different is acceleration on Formula One cars compared to our road cars? Not sure I understand that question. Formula One car is, 800 horsepower, 800 kilos. It's unbelievable rocket ship. Most road cars are like bricks on the road in terms of comparison. So, yeah, I don't really understand that. We hear about brake sensitivity across cars manufacturers. Do we? Everybody takes brakes for granted these days, don't they? Kind of. I think they do. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not on the same wavelength as you on that question. So shall I get another one then? It was another question. What was that? Have I done that super chat there? Oh, somebody mentioned Jetcraft here. What's that all about? Where are we? So I just saw the Jetcraft word in one of the questions. So, hi, Peter. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Are you related to Lando Norris? Keep up the excellent journalism and service. No, I'm not at all. No, I don't know Norris. I don't know Lando that well. I mean, obviously, if I see him, hey, Lando, how you doing? Hey, what's going on? That's about it, really. And I ask a question, then some McLaren person drags him away to make sure he speaks to somebody more important than I. So that's as far as it goes, really, with that. Jason Aviat, is Verstappen a misfit to this current era of Formula One? His racing attitude might have gone unnoticed in the 90s. Is he that much? I think a lot of people are aware of things about Max that I don't really see, because I just watch what he does in the race car on a bi-weekly basis. And I don't really get involved with all the rubbish between races. I just see him as a very focused, very talented racing driver who drives racing cars very well. Isn't that what he does? And are we talking about the fact that he's over exuberant in traffic and takes risks that others don't? Well, he's not the first guy to have done that, to make great passes. Nigel Mansell, very good example. I mean, Gerhard Berger, talked to Gerhard about being passed on the outside of Piratella in Mexico by Nigel in, 1990. So what is it about Max you think is so different? I think he's just a great racing driver and just does everything very well. No different from other great racing drivers. No different from the way Ayrton Senna was, or Nigel was, or Alan Prost, or Jackie Stewart. They all had their own way of operating, and they were all quite different from their peers at the time because they were great drivers. Jim Clark, Sterling Moss, Fangio, they all did things differently to their peers in the way that Fangio very different from Moss, Clark very different from Gurney, and so it goes on. And I think Verstappen very different to Norris, very different to Leclerc, different background, different this, different that. But he's just a great racing driver. Simple as that. Not today. Final question. Sorry for the ignorance. Why do they never make cars smaller again? Well, they are actually. The working group, I think it's called, are trying to look at ways of making the cars smaller and lighter for the regulations after 2026. I don't know how far down the road that is. Maybe they're trying to incorporate a bit of that into the 26 regs. But in general, there are two answers to that question. One, if Todd and Eccleston hadn't had a squabble and Formula One had created Formula E as it should have done, and run Formula E as part of its Grand Prix package at every race, as it should have done, to show how much Formula One cares about saving energy, then we would have continued to run normally aspirated V10s or V8s in Formula One, and the cars would be lighter and smaller as a result. One of the reasons they're so big and heavy is because of the hybrid engines we have and all the architecture required to make them work as efficiently as they do. So that's one thing. The other thing is that every time you make a car safer, whether it be a road car or a racing car, it is bigger. It's more protection. And the chassis are big now compared with 10 years ago in every dimension, head on, side, top, everything. And that's that. And every time they make a change in the line of safety, the kilos go up. We went to bigger wheels and tires because they thought the cars would look better. That put the weight up as well. And so it goes on. All these things that come under the heading of improvement always weigh more. which is all against the philosophy. You wonder what Colin Chapman spent all his life doing. He spent his whole life telling us that the way to avoid accidents was to make cars light and nimble, and that power to weight was much more important than just power dominating weight. And yet nobody pays any attention at all to Colin Chapman's philosophy, except Gordon Murray, probably. And I'm a Lotus guy, and I still think light and small and good power to weight ratio is what matters. And that's not the philosophy of Formula One. Formula One is big and heavy and crash protection and hybrid engines. V10s, smaller. Yeah, we could have smaller Formula One cars for sure. And we could have Formula One cars as safe as they are today, with smaller, lighter engines and smaller tires and wheels, and we'd have more room to overtake. Not that I think that's necessarily a major issue, but that's one of the things. But there's so much emphasis on safety. Correctly so. I don't in any way want to see cars becoming less safe. I want to see them more safe every year, safer. But, you know, the expense is weight, isn't it? So there we go. Thank you very much, everyone, for your input, your comments. Sorry if I didn't get around to answering everything, as ever. It's been wonderful to spend time and to see what generally everybody's thinking about. And it's interesting, you know, I would say at least more than 50% of you think that it would be quite a good idea to embellish the Monaco Grand Prix television coverage with a lot more of stuff that's going on around that weekend at Monaco, where everybody's in a confined space. A lot of the drivers are operating from home. And I think that would make a difference. But it would require very good direction, very good management, and very good contractual deals that Liberty need to do with the teams in order to make that happen. And of course, therefore, it never will happen, I don't think. But anyway, there's nothing wrong with floating ideas, because what else can we do in life apart from that? So there we go. Thank you very much indeed for watching again. Thank you to Jetcraft, to TrackNinja, to OEM Exclusive, and of course to REC Watchers for your support of this channel. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. And please don't hesitate to look in the description below all our videos for details of all those great companies. And also don't forget that if you are in a foreign country, kindly watching this in English, but if you do speak in another tongue, most of our videos, not this one, but most of our videos are available at least in Italian and Spanish. And in the case of the Monaco ones, we do them in French as well. And guess what? We might do some other languages as the season progresses as well. That's an audio dub over the video we put out on the normal YouTube channel. So go to that if you like. So thank you very much indeed for watching, and see you very soon after the Spanish Grand Prix. We'll see what happens there. Should be an interesting race, I think. And it could be that the order's upturned. May not be, but it could be. We'll see. See you then. Take care.